Welcome to the Milne Road Studios. It's Friday night. All right, here we go, Brian. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Milne Road Studios. We've got a big special guest, or a smallish special guest tonight. Mr. Brian Hemming. How are you, Brian?
Good, thanks, Ash. Good to be here.
Had a good week, mate?
Yeah, not too bad.
How's the Hemming household going?
Yeah, it's going. It's a bit quieter these days without the kids around, but, big house, still things to do.
So retirement is busy or slow? Or?
Yeah, everyone asks you the same question. What do you do all day? And yet I get to the end of the day, I think, what have I done all day? And yet the day's gone, and I feel like I haven't stopped, so... I'm not the only one to say that either.
No, I suppose you when you work all your life, it's hard to chop it, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you get the inevitable question. The wife gets home and says, "What have you been doing all day?" You sort of get to the point where you forget about answering that one, so you just move on.
Yes, it's almost a generic one, isn't it? That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a long time we all work, isn't it? So when you get to that time and. I keep threatening to get there earlier and earlier all the time. But Mandy and I married a nurse, as you know, and she works night shift. So imagine putting those two pebbles in the water together.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine that, actually.
You'd have to relearn it all from the ground up, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So, we're two people that don't need to be living side by side that whole time. And
yeah, I know. It's all about partnership at the end. That's the same with Nat and I. We've sort of been together over 30 years now. And, every day is another day that's a good day. So that's how I see it.
And what about the kids? Where are they these days?
Talia's just moved into her next role, and she's quite excited and doing quite well in hairdressing. So something we'd never envisaged that she'd head into, and there she is. She's loving it. So... She's doing an accelerated apprenticeship because of her mature age, and she'll be through that in about 18 months.
What prompted her to go that way?
If I knew.
What was she doing prior to that?
Before that, she was working reception-wise for a rehabilitation firm, and then before that, a doctor's surgery.
Yeah.
So we never thought she'd be grounded in those areas, but we've found something now that's putting a smile on her face. So she's really enjoying the work. And you know what? She also gets a lot of support from all her friends. She's got a big friend base, and they need people all the time to blow wave or put a rinse through and that sort of stuff. She puts the call out, and she gets people every day to do that because she's learning. She's got next to a trainer while she's there learning, with all these people getting something a little cheaper than what they would normally pay for it, because all they have to do is pay for the product, nothing else.
Yeah. Isn't that fantastic? Good on her. That's excellent.
Yeah.
How old is she now?
The twins, they turn 24 next month.
Yeah.
24 years.
God.
Yeah.
It's Caitlin's birthday today.
Yes,
Sorry,
it is.
Happy birthday, Caitlin.
Yeah, happy birthday, Caitlin.
So
she's overseas still?
In London still. Yeah. Still doing like a TA at the school.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what the code name is, but she's grunting through it. I know it's not what she wants at the minute, but I believe the visa extension has gone out 12 months, so it's out to 3 years.
Okay.
In London anyway, so that's helping her.
Well, it's a good place to be.
Not stress about the next 6 months having to make a choice what and where. But she's met Andy, and we were lucky enough to meet them in, I think it was November last year for Mandy's nephew's wedding.
Oh, yes, I saw that.
So, we had 10 days with those, which was great, when you got the family back together. And that's always beautiful when you get that time. And
exactly.
You start, getting back into the habits of being a family and all the cheeky bits that go with it that you miss.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we cherish when Reese gets home these days, it's always a sign to get together and make sure, Talia and her partner Lockie and Michaela, Reese's partner, and we always have a big meal or a barbie or something that gets us all going, and then get into the darts or
Your darts, I've left a little bit at the end of this one for
or
that.
playing our favourite card game, Five Crowns. That's always the family battle, if you like, as to who's going to be the champion on the night of Five
Who
Crowns.
is the current champion on that one?
It's divided, so
Of course it is.
It's quite funny because recently we had a game and Talia actually won, and it's the first time she's won for some time. She was so excited over winning a card game. It was good to see.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're taking over the world, aren't they? So
Yeah,
they might
yeah,
as
yeah.
well win that as well.
yeah. And Reese is in Port Lincoln these days, so working for Service SA over there. And his partner Michaela, she's the theatre nurse in the Port Lincoln Hospital. So they're looking at settling down over there, looking at buying a house over there, and they have some future there. I've got also one of my other sons lives there with his wife and two of my grandkids. So Lincoln's been now the place to go. So I get over there as much as I can.
Yeah, I've been over there a few. Boston Bay, isn't it?
Boston Bay, yes.
5 times bigger than Sydney Harbour.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
nice place. Yeah,
Was considered a port and back in the day before Adelaide, but the water supply is pretty ordinary there. So
it did come up last week in the podcast with Chris. So he did say about the water that they couldn't.
yeah, it's
Didn't have enough
still a problem right now. So they're looking at, there's been a lot of controversy if you've kept it up with them building a desal plant there.
Okay, so they'll pull the salt water out and then.
Yeah. Round in proper bay.
Dad was going to do that down at Marion Bay
Yeah.
35 years ago before that got done.
Yeah.
So we missed that. He had all the money and he probably would have seen you in the transport ticket back then
Yeah.
to get the booze brought over there. And it worked out that the desal had to happen to run the fridges. And
Yeah, it's coincidentally, my eldest son Dale he's just finished the work on the maritime side with the desal plant at Penneshaw on Kangaroo Island to boost their supply as well. So, he spent a number of months over there coordinating the project, putting all the sea pipes down and getting them up to the desal plant. So that's just finished.
is that right in Penneshaw? Is it
Just
around near the pub?
It's just to the west of Penneshaw.
Okay.
It's on the road out towards Kingscote.
Yeah.
On the top of the hill.
Okay. Yeah, I know where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been over there 20 odd times with work. I was over there when the bushfires were on, and that was amazing to see how that all worked over there with all the all the vehicles.
We spent 4 days there with an old group of mine. We catch up every 6 or 8 weeks. We call us the 70s group. So these are the guys that I grew up with, mates back in the day, and there's 6 of us, and we went to Penneshaw and used that as our base. But we spent more time in the wineries over there than we do that much touring. So, but we, Dudley Wines and South Cape and all False Cape Wines and that, they're excellent places to spend an afternoon. It's getting back to where your digs are is the issue. So
Yeah, that's always the hardest bit, isn't it? Yeah, wineries and honey, you wouldn't go to Australia over there, would you?
No.
It's a beautiful island.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I did a lot of work there back in my fisheries days, but I think we've been there 5 times now with other people, and we've always said we're going back. There's always something you've missed or you want to spend more time. There's so many things and so many attractions that you can spend time. You can go to a place like Stokes Bay, which I think was
Lovely.
Beach of the World or whatever it was at some stage.
Second.
Sorry? Second one.
Yeah, I think it came second.
Second. And then up the road, you've got Snelling's Beach, is just as beautiful. And, places like that, you can catch whiting off the beach. You can't get much better than that.
And if you go right around to Kingscote and you watch the sun come up in the morning as you're looking out towards Victor Harbour, it's just beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a world-class place.
Yes, yeah.
Everyone bitches about the cost of the ferry, but who gives a fuck? Just get on the ferry.
It's a road.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a road, and it has to be there, and there's no other way of getting there unless you want to fly
that's
there.
the cost. That's the cost. If you want to go over, you can spend your whole life worrying about whether it's the dearest one. Who cares?
Yeah. I always find it, it was a bit paradoxical back in the day that I always felt there were times, and I'm talking 20 plus years ago, where the island needed tourism, yet the locals, they were quite the opposite. They treated tourists like strangers as though they didn't want them around. And I think they've matured enough now, and there's been a lot of so-called, a lot of investment now in places for tourism that actually has changed the behaviour of the locals as well.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
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 well, it's in their
yeah,
favour, isn't it?
yeah.
And it is such a beautiful place. I know the aluminium place that I'm currently working for still did the hotel there.
Oh yeah,
So
the Kingsgate Hotel,
Penashaw.
Penashaw pub. Yeah,
So when you get up the hill there and you do the big kink left, you
yeah,
go straight ahead and park
yeah,
the
yeah,
car.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's a beautiful place. I haven't been over there for a few years now, but I took Dad over on one trip. I took Mandy over on a couple of trips, and it's a good place.
Mm,
It's got, you can be miles away from anywhere,
yeah,
and back over that 21 years, it might have been 20 odd years of going to
yeah.
and fro. When Telstra started, there was very little phone coverage at all over there. I assume it's better now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. When we ran operations over there, we struggled with communications other than our own
Smoke
UHF.
signals from
Well,
Cape Jervis.
yeah, particularly when you're dealing with abalone poachers, who by number, they've got their own way of communicating, more so than we ever had. But then we set up our own. I'll talk about that a bit later. But our own UHF radio network went statewide, so we're actually able to communicate with our patrols. So.
Is there a shelf there? Does it, because the backstairs passage
Well,
is fairly
south
deep.
of Kangaroo Island, there is a shelf, which generally is where the tuna run from. So
Okay.
back in the day, it's another story really. But back in the day, the tuna were actually caught off off the shelf out from Ceduna and Eucla. So the boats had to travel some distance to get to the tuna itself. This is before the cage tuna, the farming of tuna. This is back in the day of poling tuna, which was generally used for canning purposes. But that's where they went. Long time out there to fill up, bring it back to Thevenard or back to Streaky. And I remember vividly the semi-trailers would all be lined up, and they'd fill up the little carriage on the jetty.
The boats are coming in.
And then they'd hoist all these tuna into the back of the semi-trailer, and they'd truck them back to Port Lincoln, and no cover whatsoever. If you ever got behind one and sit behind one, you'd see these tuna tails hanging out the top of these big barrels on the back of the semi. So there was not a thought in those days of keeping them frozen or keeping them nice and fresh. So, because they went straight in the can then. It was only in the late 80s that the Japanese started taking more of an interest, and then we had Japanese observers on our vessels that would hand pick certain fish, and then they'd deep freeze them straight away.
Is that still moving in the same way it did?
No, it's significantly changed now because it's all farming. So
Better or worse?
Oh no! Look, getting the
or?
product that they want is certainly better because they go out, they per seine the fish, they net the fish once they found the schools, and they target size these days. So they don't just go and catch any old school. They'll do all the numbers about whether these are 12 kilo fish, 15, 20 kilo fish.
Okay.
And they were at a time targeting 12, 15 kilo fish, towing them back in the cages, which in itself was an exercise, getting them back, and then they'd fatten them up. So that's when they'll feed them food, primarily sardines or pilchards, as people like to call them. But that was extremely costly. It's still the means by which they operate today. But just this season, they've actually decided to target it a bit differently and gone for larger fish, so 20 kilo fish, bringing them back and reducing the need to agist them as long as they had previously, and therefore the need to rely on sardines, all caught locally, of course. So I'm getting a bit off topic.
No, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it
does.
does.
It does make sense to me. If you've got to pump another $5 or $50 a fish to fatten them up, that actually you might as well catch them fatter and get rid of them.
So they've learned over time that it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And the Japanese have been discerning enough normally to have people around the place to make sure they hand pick the stuff that will make the sashimi market price they want to get. So if we venture on then into the late 80s and early 90s, the Japanese would actually send what were called transshipment vessels to Australia, not large vessels, but these were freeze boats, they would meet up with our catch boats at places like St
Oh, right.
Francis
And
Island.
that offload.
Yeah, so 50 mile off our coast, St Francis off Ceduna. They'd come into the bay there, and the tuna boats would come in and unload all the quick frozen sashimi ready tuna onto the Japanese transshipment vessel, and they'd go straight back to Japan. And back in those days, our role was to be out there to supervise and ensure that the weight of the fish that was leaving our country was coming off their quota. They had all that quota, and was accurate. So we'd normally, in those days, helicopter from Ceduna out to St Francis Island, land on the beach. They'd send a boat ashore to pick us up, and we'd spend 2 days on the boat.
How far out is the island?
50 mile.
What's the radius of that, or how big's the island?
Oh, it's not a big island, but it's a reasonable size. It's not an island you could inhabit.
Has it got power out there?
No, nothing like that
No.
whatsoever. It's
all jet.
deserted. There's
Okay.
nothing there at all. But the interesting thing is that a lot of those islands out there, and this one was one back in the day, Parks and Wildlife actually released a number of endangered species snakes on these islands, in particular red-bellied black.
Just to boost their numbers?
Yeah, to boost their numbers. And I recall one day we'd set the chopper down on the beach because we always found it was safer on the beach away from where the snakes and that were. Not that the snakes were seemingly that prolific, but we did sight them, so we knew they were around. But this particular day, we were sitting there waiting for our boat to come in and pick us up. It was a bloody hot day, and you can't sit in the helicopter in the heat without the blades going around because it just swelter. And all of a sudden, we're about to get out onto the beach, and this bloody red-bellied black came slithering along the beach. And not only that, it actually went to the water's edge. So all the stories we'd heard that they don't get near the water went out the window. So we sat in that bloody helicopter for another 2 hours before we got picked up, by which time the snake slowly manoeuvred.
Was
got
it
away.
looking for water or?
No, we presume he's just out doing what they do. There's another side story to that. On another trip, we went out there on an island called St. Peter's Island, where we were chasing a poacher, and an abalone poacher. But we sat down on this island, and there's all these mutton boat holes all over the surface of the island. And one of the officers with me, we got out, and I'd already said, be careful when you're on the island because this one is infested with snakes. And unfortunately for him, his foot went down into a mutton bird hole. And that's where the snakes live because they chase the eggs of the mutton bird.
Yeah, right.
And he panicked. So instead of standing there and quietly just lifting his leg back out, he sort of tried to run and lift his leg out, and he lacerated all the bottom part of his leg quite badly. We had to get him medevaced out. So you never know. You never know. So that's the trials and tribulations of working in those sort of places back in the day.
So you've spent 40 odd years in the public sector?
Yep, 40 years.
Where did that all begin?
Right back in the early 70s, I started in what was called the Motor Registration Division. And so I spent most of my time first off in head office, but then in the branches. So I worked around places like Tranmere, Port Adelaide, Prospect, Marion, Berry for a stint as well. I enjoyed it, but I always knew in the back of my mind it wasn't where I was going to end up. And then 1983, this job came up, and in what's called the Gazette in the public sector, and I was looking for a fisheries officer, but the notation was aquariums. So aquariums meant dealing with the aquarium exotic fish trade in Adelaide, because at that time there were a number of exotic fish that were not allowed. For example, the worst known one, of course, is carp. But there were many other fish being imported that shouldn't be allowed to be here because they were released in the wild. They would proliferate quite rapidly in our systems. So this job meant the person who got it had to have a background, our knowledge of exotic fish. So being able to tell what a species of fish were. My background is that Mum and Dad had a business called Calico Aquariums, so they actually supplied public in Adelaide with aquariums and fish, and we used to import anywhere between 5 and 20,000 fish a week from Singapore, Hong Kong, and so they were massive quantities. And you in those days, people know what neon tetras are, for example. We'd buy them for about 10 for a cent, and you'd sell them for about $2 or 5 for $2. So the markup was incredible. Uh, the art to it was, and that's where Dad was really good, was keeping them alive and getting them to acclimatise to our water, and he did that exceptionally well. So his loss rate was quite low in comparison to other dealers at the time. But in growing up in my teenage years, I was very much a part of that business. So when I got home from school, that was what I was out. I was out the back helping Dad, either with bringing those fish in and acclimatising them, or making aquariums or lights, all those sorts of things. So that gave me the background for this particular job. So I went for my interview, and not having any understanding or thought of what this was all about, but just something to jump into differently. And look, I always think back. I was 32 at the time, 32, and there was a number of things. I'd never flown in an aircraft. I'd never driven a four-wheel drive. I'd never been on a vessel. I'd never been fishing. There was just probably about 20 things that I could say I'd never done. And all of a sudden, this was going to open those doors and more than I'd ever dreamed or imagined. So I went for the interview. They liked me, and I got the job. And though
They said, "Come on in, Brian."
yeah. So next minute, I'm in this job. I've left 10 years of motor reg behind me and a lot of good friends. And straight away, the boss at the time was new to the role. He'd been there a couple of years, and he was trying to instigate a significant change for the better, in getting respect for fisheries officers generally in South Australia. He was an ex-Victorian copper. And look, he taught me everything I end up finding out about investigation and techniques and dealing with people in interrogation and stuff like that. And I'll always be indebted to him. But so I started on this role of dealing with aquaculture in its embryonic state in those days, and exotic fish. The problem with it is once we got into it, the legislation that was being put to Parliament to deal with these problems didn't get through in its entirety. So I was left basically with a job, but no legislation by which to go out and regulate by. But all said, it was a busy time in just establishing our presence in that industry. Dad always said it was the downturn of his time in the industry when I, as his son, actually got into the industry. Yeah. So there's a lot of contentious issues around that. I always think it's because he never took up bank card as an option for people to buy things. But anyway, but very quickly I progressed into other parts of fisheries enforcement, as it was known in those days, and in particular the helicopter. So in those days we had a helicopter patrol, and the guy that ran it was also our radio expert, but his role was one of observation, so using the chop to observe offences and then call in a backup patrol. So I got to go with him for a few trips, and very quickly I was basically on my own doing it with a pilot, obviously. And I had a different view. My view was, if you see someone who's significantly offending, put down and deal with it there and then, have backup available for certain, so you had the safety areas covered. So all of a sudden, I'm now the helicopter person with the organisation, and I quickly progressed then into the operations manager for fisheries, and it was at a time when there was a lot of issues around abalone poaching. In fact, it was dubbed, I think, by the Australian Penthouse magazine at the time as the Abalone Wars, and it wasn't confined to South Australia. It was also in any state where there was abalone, and that was every state except Queensland.
Was in South Australia, like you saying you were national, was most of the abalone Kangaroo Islands south?
No,
or
no, no.
other places? I don't want
Yeah,
to cut your chain of thought there. But
no, no. Other places. So abalone in South Australian waters, there are three species, two main species commercially caught: green lip and black lip, and then there's another one called roe eye, which is a significantly smaller fish. But you'll find black lip in significant quantities along our southeast coast. And then as you get up towards the Coorong, there is no abalone. You get up to Gulf St Vincent. We used to have some abalone, very small, never achieved size limits along the metropolitan coast from Hallett Cove down to Seacliff and those Seaford and those areas. Um, but the prime areas were the north and south coast of Kangaroo Island, the York Peninsula on the western side of York Peninsula, so anywhere from Cape Elizabeth near Moonta all the way down to Pondalowie Bay. And then the big areas, of course, were the west coast. So from south of Cow all the way around to the West Australian border, significant quantities of abalone.
yeah, right.
And the attraction really was that, yes, it had a significant market in those days, export. So
Who eats the most of it?
the Asian market,
Okay.
it primarily aimed at the Asian market. It was seen as not just a food source, but it had some aphrodisiac qualities about it, as well as being a delicacy in terms of seafood. A bit like sashimi, which back in those days, not many Australians ate sashimi tuna, and now we all live on it. We just love it. But it's one of those things. And abalone is a significant taste in itself.
I
It's
can't
got
say
to
I've ever eaten it.
it's got to be cooked properly. Otherwise, you're turned off. If you're turned off, you're turned off for life. So you sit there and say, well, why is this worth so much money? I remember a poacher telling me one day that it's like picking up $20 notes off the ocean floor, and that's about what it was worth. It was worth anywhere between $70 to $120 a kilo in its meat weight outside the shell. But over time, we had a number of commercial divers who were licensed. Those licenses back in the day were worth $5+ million, so they didn't transfer very often. But their income, was set by quota, so they were allocated a quota by license, so they couldn't take any more than a certain amount of tonnage. So they knew what their guaranteed income was. It was what they could do during the catching stage and market stage is where they increased or decreased their income, if you like.
Is Australia rich with fish in general, or what do you call it, escutcheons or whatever it is?
Abalone.
Oh, no. Does the abalone come under abalone or fish?
Yeah,
or?
abalone's a shellfish, and it's a mollusk, if you like. So it's got a shell and it's got a snail, if you like, inside, and it attaches itself to reef-like material. Normally, when it's catchable, it's on sand bottom, so it's out feeding, if you like, or grazing. But it's a
in the scheme of world trade, does Australia have an abundance of everything?
Oh yeah, we've got one of the best abalone fisheries in the world, but they're everywhere. South Africa, America, South America, they're all over the place. But ours is significantly good because of the quality. Our waters are clean, and these grow to significant sizes here. So there are also size limits and bag limits. And recreational divers can take, I think it's still 5 per day, which is enough to provide a feed, that's for sure.
Every now and then, a story will come along about an abalone diver and the great white somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And you hear the stories
Yeah.
of the milky salty waters, and then they know they're running out of gas or oxygen, and they know there's a point where they've got to go up to the top.
I can tell you many stories that have been relayed to me by abalone divers. There's the unfortunate ones. I remember vividly in the early 80s a guy called Terry Manuel at Scales Bay.
Where's that? Where's Scales?
Scales Bay is just this side of Streaky, near Baird Bay, if you know Baird Bay. And
I know Streaky more, but
yeah, so it's between Streaky and
it's fairly hard coast, isn't it?
Oh yeah. But it's where the abs are, So, so he actually got to the surface and his decky was able to sort of half drag him into the boat, but the bottom part of his body had gone.
Oh no.
So he bled out pretty quickly. So yeah, that's how he went. But another guy that I always remember him telling the story, and over a couple of drinks, it was quite funny. But I won't mention his name. But he was out near the Waldegrave Islands, out of Elliston, and a white came along. He's on hooker, so he's got an unending supply of air, and this white started stalking him, and he saw it, and so he in his words, he sort of froze, and he stayed. He was on the bottom, but this thing just kept cruising by as they do, and this went on for nearly 2 hours.
Oh no.
Yeah, and he was petrified, and of course, he was worried about getting the bends and everything else, as well as this shark, because it wouldn't leave. Obviously, knew he was there and was looking for it, but he's also got abalone there that he's taken.
How deep a water?
Oh, there
9 metres or 10 metres? Or?
Yeah, in those areas,
What's the
no
depth
more
with the
than
bends?
10 metres. No more than 10 metres there. It's close to the edge of the island itself.
So if you did have to shoot up that 10 metres, are you still...
He's still got a deco. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So he couldn't have come straight up anyway.
No. And in his case, he got out, but he swore he was never going to go back again. He was a petrified man for a long time after. He did go back, but a long time after.
You'd be spooked, I think, forever. You'd be looking over your shoulder, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
What about the Australian surfer from the East Coast that they were filming him and during the ad he's punching this thing in the eyes to try to disorientate it?
Yeah, so there was a number of guys that I knew that all got taken by a shark. The Buckland incident, and the other guy, Peter Clarkson, he was allegedly attacked by 2 sharks at the same time. As the only eyewitness is the owner of the license. I won't mention his name, but he did some peculiar things following the attack, but it's not probably worth mentioning here. But
what about the Aldinga one? Was that Rodney Fox?
Rodney Fox, that's a long, long time ago. So I'm not sure where Rodney was attacked, but he's remained a prolific rider of sharks.
Is he still alive, or?
I think he is.
So that was at Aldinga, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Because we grew up really as kids at Selleck's. Mum and Dad had a place down there on, I can't even remember the street now.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, but we really grew up down there.
Yeah.
We were there. You had the shark patrol up the top there, and we used to run off and have fags and 6 packs of beer up there when we were young.
Yeah, the whole white pointer thing is one of those things that I feel for the shark. I'm one of those people that believe they should be left alone and it's their environment. But there is a growing surge, where people want to see them culled. And that would be disappointing to see that to eventuate. I think they should almost deserve the same class as what a whale does.
I think so. You're in their world.
Yeah. But, that said, I remember the last one that was captured. Well, it wasn't lawful, but it was hooked up in a mesh net out of Port Pirie. And of course, once someone brings in a shark, we were alerted, so I went straight up there. And I've still got the pictures to this day of this big shark on the back of a trailer. In fact, I had to trailer it back to West Beach. It's the South Australian Research and Development Institute for them to cut up and do some research on, because it was days after a guy called Chesson was taken by a shark down at Neptune Island. No, it might have been West Cape, at the western end of Kangaroo Island, on a cray boat, jumped over the side to get some abs for his dinner.
Got him.
And, he was gone. So they actually opened the shark up to see if there's anything in there that it might be, but it wasn't the same shark. And it was a long way away from where the event happened. But I also remember the days of when they they didn't bring people in, but people arrived here like Vic Hislop, the great Australian shark hunter. And, he would come in and put all these floating barrels and these massive stainless steel hooks with these massive baits on to take sharks that allegedly had taken people. In that case, it was the Shirley Durden that was taken at Louth Bay. And he did achieve some, but what he was doing in terms of the way he was baiting and fishing was quite unlawful in South Australia. He was a Queenslander, and I remember this Friday afternoon. It was it was a it was a summertime, and there was a scallop diver had been taken off Seacliff days before, and there was still rumours around that the white was still hanging around the area. And there was significant pressure through the media from the local yachting and diving and swimming clubs to actually do something about it. Now, when you say do something about it, I'm not sure what that actually means or manifests into. So we got word that this Vic Hislop had turned up and had put significant numbers of baits out. So the boss said to me, I need you to get down there and do something about it. And I said, well, what are we doing? And he said, well, he's using unlawful baiting methods, barrels and so on, and oversized
What
hooks.
is it, just fermenting with
Well,
blood?
if you've seen the film Jaws, it's just like that. Okay. So these are big, like 44-gallon plastic drums.
Hey, Skip, I think you need a bigger boat.
Yeah, that's him. That's him. And on the end of them is this big, giant stainless steel hook. And he brought these baits down with him from Queensland. So giant rays and big cod and stuff. Anyway. So this is Friday afternoon. This is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm saying, well, I'll have to take a patrol boat out. And there was no one else around. And this other bloke had turned up from Sejourner, one of our guys from Sejourner. I said, what do you got on? He said, well, I was going to a motel and bunk up. And I said, no, you're not. You're coming with me. So I went and picked up the patrol boat and headed down there. And we launched at O'Sully's. And we went out. And we found these barrels. It was one of those days, if you've ever seen Jaws, it's this flat, calm, beautiful, sunlit day. And I've never forgotten it because it was just eerie in itself. And we were the only boat out there. And it's in a perfect primo fishing day, we're the only boat there.
Did anything turn up?
The first thing we saw was one of these big blue barrels. So we headed for that. And I remember saying to my offsider, Richard, well, we've got to hoist this up and bring it, take it in. So we got alongside and pulled the barrel on, and then we found another barrel that was a bit below the surface. That came on. And then we just pulling this thing up. And I remember pulling this line up, and the music was even going in the back of my mind. Boom, 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 And because it was so still, and all of a sudden the bait appeared, and it was a giant ray, and it's flaking away as you're coming up. So, it's starting to deteriorate in the water. And so we got alongside, and I think this if there's a shark here, it's going to come now.
Oh, God.
And so we got it on board. It was that big that took up the whole back area of the boat. We had to actually stand on it to drive the boat. That's how big the ray was. And so then we found another one, brought that up, and had a big rock cod on the end of that. And so we took them into the shore, right in front of the Seacliff Yacht Club. And this is Friday afternoon now. We're not talking about 5:30, 6 o'clock now. There's my boss and another one of the officers there. And they've engaged in conversation with this Vic Hislop. So we thought, oh, this is going to go well. So we brought in, and the boss was going right off, this is what we're talking about, da, da, da. So we had to unload the whole thing out. And he admitted, I think he had another couple out there. And so we went back out and found more, but basically he was told, thanks, but no thanks. We don't need you in South Australia. You can leave now. And I think we found another one and brought that in. But that was one of those times you just don't forget around those heady times when and these days it's almost become common news.
When do you reckon that was?
Oh, that would have been 1990, around that time.
Oh, right.
Yeah, maybe
still
a bit before that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the whole problem was still around in those days, and there was still plenty of people out hunting them, even once the legislation had gone through to protect them.
Yeah, I'm a bit like you with the great whites. I think you're in their world.
Yeah.
If they're on the beaches and they're running up the beaches and they're grabbing young children, that's something different. But whilst you're in their world, my family has come from Middleton. They spent 20 odd years down there before Dad died.
Yeah.
And my brothers surf. So that's in my world often
Yeah.
regarding,
Yeah.
you know, when you get shark attacks, everybody goes to the one beach and they all surf one break until,
Yeah.
you know, it calms down a little
Yeah,
bit. And then
yeah.
you go back to Yorks and Pondy and all that sort of gear. But
Yeah, so that prompts probably three quick ones, if you like.
yeah, yeah.
Back in my helicopter days, only saw 3 whites over a period of 3 years from the helicopter. One was at Port Neal about 6:30 in the morning, and I swear it took up the whole
Over on the West Coast.
over in the West Coast.
Yep.
It almost took up the length of the jetty. So we're out there doing a coastal patrol in the early hours for looking for recreational nets, which were illegal in there. And there was this thing, and I thought, what is that?
How long do you reckon it was?
I have no idea. It was a
Enormous.
very big shark. And the first thing you notice from the air with these things is the girth. The girth is immense. But
Are they male or female or both, or what are
both. Sorry, they could be male or female.
they? Okay. Are the females?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. No.
Does the female breed, I suppose? Does it?
Yeah. But the getting back to you're talking about Middleton, there was another time we went. We were heading down the Metro Coast and actually heading to Kangaroo Island, but we'd gone round the corner at Cape Jervis towards Waipinga, and
Beautiful spot.
yeah. So as we got to Waipinga, we could see a few surfers around the place, and all of a sudden, we just noticed this dark thing up ahead of us, and the pilot said, "That's a shark." And I said, "Let's get a bit closer." And I always say to this day, I swear we could have landed on the back of the thing if it had been the girth was that big.
Wow.
But the scary thing was that between the shore, the shark was between the shore and a surfer. There was a surfer sitting out wide looking for a break, and so we went over to the surfer and sort of circled around and tried to tell him to go in. He didn't. He didn't.
He said the
respond.
surf's too good, mate.
Yeah.
Will you tick off? I'm waiting for the break to come through.
Yeah. So we actually landed on the beach, and he came in, and he skirted in, and he had no idea, and he said it's only when we landed that he thought something was going on. So anyway, that part of it was okay. We put back in the air, and we went further around towards Victor, and we found the shark again, but in front of it was this massive school of salmon.
No,
So
it
was just stalking,
chasing it.
Yeah. And we saw him actually dart in, as they do.
Clear him out.
Get a couple,
Scatter
and
'em.
obviously you scatter them and move on. So that was probably the largest I'd seen. And then there was another time where we were again on the north coast of Kangaroo Island at Island Beach.
Yep, beautiful,
Island
beautiful
Beach,
spot.
yeah. So this was a sunny...
And that's a shallow beach too, isn't it?
Yeah. This was a sunny afternoon, and we were... There was from a fisheries perspective, there wasn't a lot of interest in that area from our perspective, unless it was netting. But so we were sort of manoeuvring along, and the pilot, Trevor, said to me, "That looks like a shark down there." And I looked and I thought, "It can't be. There's sand there, And so we went down low, and there, sure enough, was this white. There was a gutter, just a gutter of water that was almost, he was out of it, and he was just slowly meandering along this gutter of things, and you could see the occasional mullet or whatever fish in front of him. There was something he was actually talking, but not that way but in the distance, we actually saw a family on the beach, and the kids were actually bathing in the gutter. So that was our priority. Then we went to them, and they got out, and then we went back and we tried to buzz the chopper down on the shark, and we got him to move out, as we'd done previously.
So that was a large one again?
That was a large one, yeah. Again, it's quite innocently looking obviously for a feed, and the feed was fish, not humans, but there they were up in its path. So
it's funny, I've seen a few docos where they've tagged some of them in South Africa.
Yeah.
And these things might travel all the way to Australia, do a couple of loops, and then go up. And they do some enormous distances, don't they?
We had a guy working in South Australia called Barry Bruce, who went to Tassie in the end. He was the expert on sharks, and I used to joke to him because Barry had eyes like a white pointer shark. So he's one of those people that was in love with his whole profession. But yeah, they did a lot of tracking of sharks in those days and saw the significant distances they did travel and return to where they'd come from.
There was the early videos, wasn't there? Ron and who was the wife?
Valerie.
Valerie.
Yeah.
That's
Taylor.
God damn it, he's bitten me this time. And,
Yeah.
oh, it's a big one, run, and she's opened up the wetsuit and the blood's gone.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, once again, I was saying before, the boys were surfers. I always loved my snow skiing. So if I got eaten by a yeti, I'd be unlucky. If they got eaten by a shark, it was likely.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I think it'd be a horrible way to go. Like if they got you around the neck quickly and it was all over.
I think as time's gone on, the ones of more recent times have been probably more horrific, but it's probably because there's been more witnesses and more people are still out there going and surfing in these particular areas, like at Elliston and Cactus and Back Beach at Streaky and
Way
places.
pinga. Look,
Yeah.
if you get bitten there, even if you lost the bottom end of your leg, you wouldn't be able to drag yourself up that beach and get.
But I mean, I surfed back in my day, but and it wasn't even in your mindset that you might get taken by a white. And you talk to surfers these days, and yeah, it's a risk of surfing. But what's the chances? 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000.
It'd be like a lottery, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The odds of you getting taken would be very low. But
Yeah.
if it's your time where you won the lotto,
Yeah. I recently did a trip to the West Coast with my in-laws, and I took them to all the old spots. And there's a little place that I've always loved west of Ceduna called Port Sinclair. And there's a story that goes at Port Sinclair in that Point Sinclair. It's just on from Cactus Beach where the surfers go.
Yep.
There's a jetty there, and back in the day, a couple of fishermen worked out of there. And in particular, this time the fishermen had a couple of boats moored in the harbour, a couple of rock lobster boats, and the story goes, and the plaque's still there. The 11-year-old lad who actually swam out to the boat to get a crayfish for his mum, and basically swam straight into a white and was killed. So they're the sad parts of the history of the whites, and they'll never be forgotten in those sort of areas.
no, I think it's as we said before, you're in their world, so you can't condemn them for doing what they do naturally.
No.
If there was a medical advantage from taking a specific shark and then rebreeding it for a program for medicine,
Yeah.
that's completely different. But
Yeah.
we always said putting a white pointer in a pool, you're just going to kill it.
Yeah.
It wants to just
Yeah.
do what it wants to do.
Yeah.
It's the king, isn't it? It's the lion, so let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were the start of my fisheries days, and this is now the mid to late 80s. Helicopter patrol, then the state operations manager, but then we started concentrating a lot on the abalone poaching problem because
Australia-wide?
well, it was Australia-wide, but I'm talking about from a statewide perspective.
Yes, yeah.
But from a national perspective, we did get together with our interstate counterparts
Okay.
very regularly, because what we found was there were a number of poachers that were actually crossing borders. So if they crossed borders, they posed a different problem again, in that they came in with no thought or empathy for the state's fishery, and basically would poach the guts out of the areas that they fished. So there were a number of gangs of poachers, if you like, that came out of Victoria, and probably the most significant was a guy called David Campbell Strawn, who's probably the most convicted abalone poacher in Australia. Convictions in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia. So he became a centre of attention, but we also focused our efforts on the other areas like the buying end. So if you've got poachers, they have to have a person or buyer that's going to take the abs. So it's like the drug trade. And so
it's a real crime scene, isn't it?
Yeah. So we put a lot of attention into, one, who the buyers were and how we deal with them, and what we do from a legislation perspective. So back in that era, we started bringing in legislation that for the first time you saw people get jail term for poaching abalone. And for possessing abalone, the fines were significant, $20,000 to $40,000.
So that's you as the purchaser, is it?
Yeah,
the
this is
illegal
the purchaser being in possession of abalone taken unlawfully.
I don't want to cut you off there.
No.
How do they then get them international from there?
Ah, well, a
Like
lot of it's for domestic market. So the Asian restaurant trade could
okay, so
provide
it would
the
just
delicacy.
dissipate
Yeah, slowly
okay.
through that. But there were unlawful processes that would take significant quantities, commercial quantities from poachers that would end up in cans. So we certainly identified that the canning of illegal abalone was one way of offshoring abalone. But then the market became more discerning in terms of the canned abalone wasn't seen as the quality abalone as compared to fresh or what they see now as in shell. So they actually
Okay.
export them in shell. The marketplace changed, if you like, and I think that probably outgrew the buyer potential, but it still didn't stop poachers. So poachers being people that were prepared to go out, take abalone, and then try and market it wherever they could. And those that were more organised were obviously doing the best out of that. In the case of the Strawn operation I was talking about, we worked very closely with our Victorian counterparts. They had an abalone task force in those days, as we did, and this particular day, this is 1989, I got information from my counterpart in Victoria that this operation was on the move. A vessel had left one of their properties in Melbourne and was heading towards our border. So at that stage, this group had attacked our coastline a number of times previously, and our local officers in Mount Gambier and Kingston had not been able to stop them. So I put in a lot of effort to make sure this time, if they were going to break our border, that we could do something about it. And a couple of Victorian officers, covert officers, tracked their vehicle to Hamilton, where they overnighted. They picked up a couple of locals there that was part of their crew. Then they headed to South Australia, and I grabbed a couple of guys, experienced guys with abalone perspective out of Lincoln, flew them over to Adelaide at 6 o'clock that night. We were on the road by about 9 o'clock that night, and 4.5 hour drive to Mount Gambier. We got there at probably 1 in the morning, got into our motel, trying to get some sleep, and I reckon it was about 3 o'clock I got the phone call to say these guys are hooked up and they're on their way. So the other guy, the Victorian guys, stayed in touch, tracked them through. So then I had to do a number of things. I told the local officers to do what they would normally be doing that day. Really? So they were actually attending a training course at local TAFE. So I said, no, you guys do that, because these poachers, as we found out later, did drive-bys to find out where the cars were. And I grabbed the two guys I had with me and the two Victorians, and we found where they were going to poach by the track they went into. And we'd done some prelim work months before on a place called Finger Point. Finger Point being significant in the southeast because that's where the sewerage outlet was. And so we'd been able to get into the government-owned property for surveillance purposes. And these guys had actually set up in the bay directly below where we got into. So getting in was by stealth because we had a number of vehicles. And for the rest of that day, set up two teams of surveillance.
Would you have some black Lincolns, did you?
No, we just had to be very careful and careful about how we got them in there because they were white bloody Land Rover four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So we got two teams into the scrub, so they sort of belly flopped all the way down to close as they can, and they laid there all day, taking obs, making notes. They had one of them didn't have a notebook. He had an envelope that he unfolded to its extreme lengths. He had a pencil, and that's how he made his notes during the day, which was significant when we got to court later. So there was one Victorian, one South Australian in one team, and one Victorian, one South Australian in the other team. This went on all day, and these guys were going hell for leather. There were 5 on the boat. They filled up significant numbers of bags that they then put back over the side. Towards dusk, we had no idea what was going to eventuate.
Could it have got nasty?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
These guys weren't known for violence, but when you put pressure on them in an area where there's nobody around, you just don't know what's going to happen. So we would take every precautionary step we could. I remember that I was really worried about these guys in the bush because they had no food. So I actually got out and drove down to Port Macdonald, went to the bakery, and got all this food, and then I bloody shimmied down to where they both were located, give them some food to carry on for the rest, and a notebook for as well as carry on that part of the process. Anyway, when they up anchored, put everything in, they had a vehicle on shore as well. So we weren't sure whether we'd monitor where the vehicle went or where the vessel went. The vessel went out off the horizon, like it just went straight out to sea, and like there's nothing out there. So we couldn't work out whether it was going south or north. So I got my crew, picked up my crew.
Do you think they got spooked that they were?
Oh no, they'd finished the day.
Okay.
They'd caught all the abalone
So
they could do.
the boat was just heading straight out.
Yeah, that was to avoid detection. That's for certain. So we went to Port Macdonald, no sign. You know, we got up on the lookout area, scanned out over the whole sea, could not see the boats whatsoever. So I said, well, there's only one other place they can be going, it's South End. So we jumped in the car, and this is where I exceeded the law requirements for some period of time because I certainly put the Ford through its paces that day, and there's 4 of us on board, and we sped up to the back roads to South End, and we got there just on the last bit of light, drove up to the lookout at South End, put the binos out onto Riverlea Bay, and I just saw right out in the middle of the bay the yellow flashes of their wet weather gear that they'd been wearing when we saw them leave. And they were just sitting out right out in the middle of Riverlea Bay out at sea, just bobbing around. So that was enough for me that we knew then they had to be coming in. Then we had a stroke of luck. We found one of their cars in the caravan park at South End. So we then went into action. So in the meantime, the guys who had been doing their TAFE course in Lincoln, I'd mobilised them up to back us up. And there's a siding just outside of South End that they'd pulled into. So we've now got 4 more officers and 3 more vehicles. And the other vehicle I had with me, I'd sent them onto Beachport in case they end up going to Beachport to cross out the side of Riverlea Bay. I remember driving back down from the lookout towards South End Township and trying to work out where we're going to post our guys. The Victorian guy...
Are they armed or unarmed?
No, they're unarmed. The Victorian guy, Andrew, he said, well, I'll jump out here. So it was a near post to the caravan park. So we're driving along at probably only 10 k's per hour, and all of a sudden the doors open and Andrew's rolled out the side of the car. And as he's rolled out, all we could hear was these chicken noises. He's rolled straight into someone's chicken coop. So that's where we left him, and then I dropped another one at an opening in the bay where we thought they'd get obs on the boat coming into the ramp. And the other guys, lo and behold, the poacher's vehicle actually turned up at the same siding where our other officers were. So there they were, face-to-face, car-wise, in this same siding. So obviously
You've done pretty well, haven't you?
Oh, they obviously then realised that we were on site, and things just went fast as. They had no way of communicating with the boat, which was on its way in. And lo and behold, the guy that we had sitting on the beach side at the gap, they unloaded all the abs. So they had the abs in these big bags tied to a string. So there would have been, I think, about 14 or 15 bags of abs. There was a lot of abs. And they just dropped them all over the side and then proceeded on into the boat ramp. So then they got to the boat ramp, got the car out of the caravan park, put the car on the trailer, that sort of stuff.
That was a rendezvous point for later.
Yep. So the guy that was down there, he apprehended them. So he got them before they could go any further.
What's the force of authority?
None. No, we're fisheries officers. We can say we're fisheries officers. We believe that you've undertaken some illegal activity, we're going to do certain things. We've got the power of arrest if they resist and so on. But at this stage, we've also alerted police from Millicent who were on scene, basically. We had to give them directions as to where we wanted them. So they had arrived as well. And so then out of nowhere, one of the poaching gang came where the beach and the stuff was loaded, and he was about to go out and pull this stuff in, and and we let him do that. And then once he got to shore, still in the waves basically, the other Victorian guy came out and said, "We're fisheries, da da da." This guy took off, swam out. He's going, no idea where he's going.
Harold Holt.
So the officer actually jumped in the water and chased him as well and brought him ashore. And it's interesting that for the first time in that sort of role, I saw a guy that had given everything, go to pieces basically. I just heard this coughing and spluttering and crying, and these guys are cuffed up by now and they've got the coppers there. And this is the Victorian guy the adrenaline had just been too much. He was spewing, he was crying.
He knew he was fucked.
He'd been a surveillance officer most of his career, so he'd never been at the end where you get them. He'd always been where you let go and keep your recognition, identification secret. So I learned a lot, just in that night, and then the police picked up 2 more hitchhiking down the road, just out the hitchhiking. We're now talking probably midnight.
That's a fairly involved
Yeah.
process, isn't it? Like from where it started 15 minutes ago to having the cop breakdown and everything else.
And the people of Southend had no idea. They've got no idea that this is all
So
happening in their little
somebody
quiet township.
watching all that time.
Yeah.
And they would have thought, okay, it looks like we're safe now.
So in the end, there was
like even when they dumped the abalone, they were still none the wiser that there was a whole load waiting to just arrest them.
One of the things we remarked on at our debrief sometime after that there was just no one locally that ventured out that night to say, hey, what's going on?
Did you ever fear after that of yourself? Did you ever fear that Hemming Blake?
We took a lot of precautions, around that. There were other times, but we that particular night we ended up apprehending.
How'd you sleep that?
Well, that's another story. We ended up apprehending 6 poachers from that operation. We seized 2 vehicles. Both were four-wheel drive, hired from Avis. We seized the boat. It was a brand new Haynes Signature.
Okay.
Worth about 50 grand. And we seized all the diving equipment. All had been hired. All tanks had been hired. And there was, I think from memory, 12 or 15 tanks, dive tanks.
Was that in the scheme of things, was it only a small percentage that you caught?
In terms of poachers?
Is it still going on? Of course it is. Is it still going on?
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, of course it is. We found that I'd sent one of the police patrols down to what's called number 2 Rocks through the back road of the top of Southend, and they found a couple in a car, but weren't prepared. They didn't have enough suspicion to go and talk to them because it's 1 o'clock in the morning, or that they're camped there, But the very next day, a local teacher who'd taken a school group to that same location walked in and showed these photographs where they'd found untold number of boxes of abalones thrown in the scrub right where this car had been. So that was another part of it. So in the end, before we got to court, we'd actually worked out there were 13 people in that gang working that day. The ones that were doing surveillance back in Mount Gambier, the ones up at number 2 Rocks, the ones we apprehended, and another operation that was down at Port Mac at the same time. So it was a significant role. We got to court. They pleaded not guilty. Had a Victorian barrister. But once we sort of did our bit of providing what was going on and what information we had on the day, I remember their barrister leaning across to our prosecutor and saying, I haven't got a hope here, have I? And our prosecutor just smiled at him. And that was it. They called it a recess and pleaded guilty. So they received the highest fines ever.
Significant?
In South Australia, over 100,000 collectively. One of the main guys, other than the Victorian guy I mentioned, was an ex-South Australian footballer who I got to know well over the years following that, because he was actually thankful of the way we actually treated them at the time, that we treated them with respect. We didn't treat them like arseholes, if you like. So that was a good outcome, and I was able to glean information from him over time. But there were other times where, you put yourself in harm's way and you know that you shouldn't be doing it, and the outcomes could have been significant. I always remember a guy in Victoria who they'd come across a camp of poachers on a cliff top, and he'd sort of simmied into the camp in the bush and listening to them around their campfire and that sort of stuff, and they found him, discovered him. They beat the shit out of him and actually threw him over what they thought was a large cliff, but it wasn't. And he was quite injured, by it. And the problem was that there was no backup, and the guy that was with him actually drove in to the camp at speed, and these guys were then trying to escape in their car, and he actually put his fist out and put it through their side window, and of course it mashed his hand up significantly. He was badly injured. So there's people that in the job sometimes that put themselves in the superhuman perspective, and what we used to always say is you're hiding behind your badge. Your badge doesn't protect you to that length. So I actually got that officer that was beat up over to one of our conferences to give the spiel, if you like, to our guys about what you should and shouldn't do. Not so much as for the purposes of training our guys, but also it gave him an outlet to actually relay the experience he'd had, which he hadn't previously had much of. Back in those days, we didn't do a lot about PSD and that sort of job. So
Sure. I think it's an enormous task what you've done there anyway, but Mandy's brother-in-law, his father was with the feds, and he came from I won't say his name, but he came over from Wales, and he used to live just local here, just south of the city there, and I know that the grey seats would rock up and he'd be gone for 5 days. Mum never knew where he was.
yeah,
He'd come back, and
yeah,
I was lucky enough to sit down with him in Townsville, and he said, hey,
yeah,
he put this glass in front of me, and it was fairly dark, and I thought, I'm not even going to ask what's in that one. And
yeah,
they'd gone off to the basketball, and I sat down, and he told me a whole load of stuff, and I thought, oh, God.
yeah,
You've got this whole network of people working that you're just going about your daily life, not even knowing that these things exist. Quite often we get the helicopter, as you hear up here,
yeah,
with the mufflers on.
yeah.
And, the last, because Manny works night shift, I'm always up and about anyway, and as soon as I hear the chopper, I go straight on to the
The local website.
and just see where this copper,
Stir them up.
and just see the
Yeah.
distance these things are going. And, they might go out to St Kilda, and then they've been up here late. They haven't been in the last couple of weeks, but the last 2 or 3 weeks prior to that, the chopper was up here quite often, and I'd often just stand out the back there and leave a heat signature and watch how many times they go round, because they were going to Halloran Hill, not Anstey's Hill here, and then back over Hope Valley and around, and
So apart from the dangers with the poachers, I remember one of our poachers, Alan. I won't say his surname, but he was our second most prolific court poacher in South Australia. I remember him saying to me once, he said, Brian, I hear you guys are looking at carrying guns. And I said to him, Al, while I'm in the job, that's not going to happen. But there was a call for officers to be armed, as they were in Victoria. And I just said no. He said, well, I just want to put my 2 bobs worth in. You guys get armed, we get armed. He said, you make it, that sort of game, we'll do the same. And that was a significant tell for me that, that if you kept the game at a respectable level, this was only fisheries offences.
Sure.
As I used to say to my officers all the time, no fish is worth a life.
the fishing industry, even in the domestic scene that I've seen, is that it is quite political from one party to the next. And I'm not talking government here, I'm talking people fishing in certain areas, and they've all got their own spots and and nobody tells anybody where they're going. And I saw that boat out there 2 nights a week. He's been in that same spot. Go out and see what his coordinates are, and and we'll plug him in. And I'm thinking, what's going on in this fishing world?
Yeah, I know. It's one of those areas where I look at a lot of their sites these days, you know, and the things that they say, and you know, if only they were informed, you know, a lot of the comment is just ill-informed, you know, it's just wrong. And I just love to want to jump on there at times and say, you're just wrong. You know, this is not the case. But, you know, they'll sit there and put government down as much as they can. But the government, in terms of the department, you know, can only do what the research says can be done, regardless of what people think might be done. And I always hark back to the cod episode in Newfoundland in Canada that collapsed many years ago. That the fishery was in trouble for a long, long, long time, and
This is in
in
Canada.
Canada off
This is the
Newfoundland.
Canadian fishing industry that
Yeah,
was in trouble.
yep, the cod fishery, and the scientists relied heavily on the data provided by the commercial fishermen as to how big the biomass was each year, and then what was the allowable catch for the fishery. But what happens, and what happens in most fisheries, is the biomass of the fishery, it collapses and collapses and collapses, but the fishermen still remain vigilant and able to catch the fish regardless of how big the biomass is. And if they're still getting the same catch as they were previous years, the scientists have got no other thing to say that there's nothing wrong until the year they go out and there's nothing, because there were nothing left. The biomass had gone. And I always look at the good side of that story was the snow crab fishery was it was like the least financial fishery of all, became the most prolific because the fish that predated on the snow crab was the cod. With no cod, snow crab went berserk, prices went berserk, and these guys became the millionaires. So, and that's a side story, but it's an interesting read when you see why decisions were made.
I saw in some of your data that I'd read through that you had an international presence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, how far does that go?
Look, I spent some time working with New York Police Department, primarily
I love New York. Tell me.
Yeah. So primarily on the zero tolerance process approach, and on ComStat. Oh, and I'll talk about ComStat in a minute. But the zero tolerance process was that came in under a police commissioner, Bragg. I can't remember his name now. But it was based on the broken windows theory. So if you see a broken window, if you don't fix it, it attracts more crime, more broken windows. So if you fix it, it stops crime. So the zero tolerance approach was basically when the New York Police Department got down to the level of booking the squidgy guys who come up and cleaned your windscreen, because that was unlawful at a misdemeanor size. But if you stop people at that level, it stops them going into further crime down the track. That was the theory. And so New York Police Department adopted that approach. Received a lot of criticism, but it also had resounding impacts in terms of law and order. But when I was there, a new commissioner, Howard Saffer, had come into play. First thing I noticed was, because I was working with people in his office, was that they did everything possible to get rid of any recognition of the previous commissioner. And that seems strange to me.
What year are we talking here?
97, 97 I think it was, 95, 97. So Howard Saffer had come in and taken over, and he wanted to instill his way of doing business. And it's a bit like when Mick Noonan took over as coach of North Adelaide back in the day. You know, he wanted everything about Barry Robran taken out of the club, and this was similar. So I was even cautioned when I was there of even talking about the previous commissioner.
How did you get involved in getting involved in New York?
Oh, well, I wanted, and we were looking at what we would do in terms of zero tolerance in particular, and the ComStat, which I'll talk about.
Okay, you did say that. Sorry, that's my fault.
It was at that time the leading model internationally in terms of law enforcement, because their results were quite significant. So that's why my boss wanted me to go, and I said, well, yeah, obviously I'd go and do it. But I lived on Staten Island for the time I was there, and caught the ferry across every day and enjoyed the New York life. But
I'm in a New York state of
yeah,
mind.
yeah,
What a wonderful place.
yeah. That ferry ride every morning, seeing the statue on one side. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Anyway, it was fucking winter.
I can
It
see
was winter.
America.
It was winter. It was freezing cold. And so went to One Police Plaza every day. That's where I fronted. And a couple of guys I'd met, patrol guys, said to me one night. He said, "If you want to look at the real side of zero tolerance, come out with us tonight." So I went out with them, and they were one black, one white guy, and fun guys to be with. And they took me down to, it was in the Bronx, and it was a shop front. And I thought, oh, what are we doing here? But next, as you got closer, there's a queue of people going into this shop front. It was like I think it was a bakery. And so
They weren't getting cakes.
no, this was about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so we went in, and there was a sort of a reception for them, but they weren't worried about it. When it was actually a movement against zero tolerance policing. It was quite active, and a lot of people involved, white and black. And I was surprised. I was so surprised that there was this community reaction to the policing method that was being used by the New York police, which eventually they toned down. But so that was an eye opener for me. And I thought, well, if people here are that reacted to that, Australia's not going to accept that sort of approach whatsoever.
Sure. Sure.
But the other part of the process was ComStat, so the computer stats it's short for. ComStat is a performance management process, and it's the most dynamic thing I've ever been part of in my life. So Friday mornings, 7 o'clock, front and centre, One Police Plaza in the basement, and you walk in and you sit there and you're just in awe.
How many tellies did they have?
Look, I'll tell you, that's no joke. The roof was full of tellies. There were screens all parts of the roof and the sidewalls, and there were stats, intelligent stats, all everywhere you could look. And I was sitting in this back part, and they do a full introduction. And joining us today is Brian Hemming from Fisheries in South Australia, and so and so and so and so. And you sit there just in awe of what they go about. It says the commissioners there, all the assistant commissioners there, all the chiefs of police are there.
Do you know, as much as the Yanks get knocked, right, you never see a shitty road. You never see a shitty highway.
Yeah.
You don't see 3 tarmac snow clearing machines. You get 65 of them.
Yeah.
You don't have a one-way road like we had for all those years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's have a little.
Yeah.
All right, we had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I think a couple of episodes ago we were calling it puberty. Adelaide's just moved on from puberty, I think, at the moment or towards the end of it. But they don't do things in halves. They go to the nth degree rather than, we'll just filter through a little bit here and a little bit here. They don't fuck around.
No.
Especially in New York. Like you could see we spoke to the cops after 9/11 in California, and you can hear the Californians. They're a chirpy, happy mob. And then you come to the East Coast and you talk to the Yanks. And like I always wanted photos with the cops over there. And by the time we got to New York, hey, Ash from Adelaide, Australia, can I get a photo with you? And they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Now, eventually they did, but if you look in the photos, they were always sad. If you look at the New York people, they're all dressed in black. Doesn't matter where you go. If you know in New York and it's local, they got black on. You pick up these things and you learn it. You live there for a month. When Caitlin was over there, we went over there twice. To me, New York's getting a bit of a kick again now that it's a scumhole, shithole. It's gone the wrong way after COVID. But at the end of the day, look at the size of it. It's still growing. Look at the Hudson Yards down on the Hudson River there.
Yeah.
They're still building 80, 90-story buildings down the side there. This, when we were in 42nd Street there was a thing on the wall that was saying about the deficit in America per minute.
Yeah.
And I think every second it was running $1 million. Sure, you know, there's a war on at the moment. There's a war machine that's going crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take us too far off the track here, but to me, New York, if you get the opportunity, not you, you've already been there.
Yeah.
I've already been there a couple of times as well. I love the place. We stayed at East Harlem. We lived with the black people out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
No one gives us a hard time.
No.
Maybe back in the 70s it would have been
Yeah,
a bit harder.
Yeah.
But all you hear is the ladder companies. But I love, you know, I'm just romancing a little bit with New York there. When we landed the first time
to start singing or what?
from JFK, we walked, and it was cold. It was 2 degrees or something. I said, Mandy, we had to drop the bags off at East Harlem there, and we walked into Central Park, and it wasn't cold then. It was cold, but it wasn't snowy. And we ended up walking all the way into 42nd Street. Now, we were staying on 132 or 134 East Harlem. So it was a fair walk in there, but how wonderful to see that. I love Essex House. You know, I'm a construction glazier, high-rise glazier. I love the buildings. You got, you know, as soon as you get to 60th Street there, you got these buildings that go up 102 stories or 104 stories or whatever. Midtown, you've got all the Empire State and then you get down to the money part down the bottom. Have you been over there since they did
No.
We did that tour.
Yeah, look, it's not on my bucket list to do.
It
but
wasn't a happy thing to see.
If I went, I would definitely want to spend some time there at the 9/11.
To see the bathtubs. They are just unreal.
Yeah, I think, you know, all of us will always be affected in our lifetime.
Do you remember where you were?
Oh, yeah. I was on the Gold Coast. I woke up.
Isn't that amazing? Everyone knows where they were on 9/11.
Well, it was a significant event in Australia at the same time.
Yes.
It was the collapse of Ansett at the same time.
Was it?
Yeah. So we were in a motel on the in a timeshare in Gold Coast. Woke up. The kids were obviously only 2 years old, but I put the telly on and I thought I was watching a movie. And I'm sure other people have said the same thing. And in the end, I said to Nat, "Come and look at this. This doesn't look like a movie to me," because by then it's on replay. And I just sat there for I don't know how many hours after that, just watching it, and couldn't believe it. You know, you just couldn't comprehend this was happening. So, but you know, that time and that Comstat process was that significant. It's actually been adopted by the South Australian Police. They actually used the same process down at Thurvey Barracks.
Okay. I think that was the year Leighton Hewitt won too, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
I reckon he was there in September just prior, and he'd won it.
Yeah.
And it was obviously the 11th.
Yeah. There were so many things happening around the same time. So Nat's grandmother died back here. So Nat flew back for the funeral and left me with Jody, our friend, and the kids on the Gold Coast. And the night before this unfolded, we'd actually been to the local surf club and I'd won $1,800 on the poker machine as a jackpot. And that actually paid for Nat's airfares to get back and to and back.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But going back to the Comstat process, that on this particular day, there was 2 issues that they were dealing with. One was a number of bar robberies. So you remember the little bars in New York, they're like houses that, you know, you go in the front door and there's a little bar there. And there'd been a number of hold-ups, and in particular where the hold-up person was using a shotgun. And so it became the history. And all of a sudden, all these stats are flicked onto the roof of this particular borough saying, you know, what's happening here. And then the assistant commissioner would come in and say, well, what have you been doing with the neighbouring, you know, precinct, da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden they're going, we want, this is what's going to happen. By 2 o'clock this afternoon, there will be a task force, a task force in place with officers from this region, from this area, from all that sort of stuff. And this is what they'll be focused on until we get a climax. and it was so dynamic that I'll never forget it.
I don't really want you to tell me exactly where it was, but where was the Comstat situated in,
In One Police Plaza. It's in the basement.
which is in Manhattan,
Yeah. In
in the
Manhattan.
business district?
Yeah.
So it was an underground thing?
Yeah. Well, there's a big building there. It's the whole police area. So the commissioner's up on about the 14th, and then you go
I
down.
reckon we might have. You're down near the Brooklyn Bridge.
I can't
No,
remember
that's
that
all.
detail.
I know. I remember doing the bus tour there. We did that open
Ah,
bus
okay.
tour up the top.
Yeah, but and then there was another part that evolved not long after that, where they called up a borough commander. So obviously there's 5 boroughs, and they're a commander of each borough. And this borough commander was called up, and they weren't the stats in his area weren't favourable in terms of not just solving crime or crime numbers, but everything. Everything was just so out of whack with the other 4 boroughs. And these guys just reel off the stats. You've got this, you've got that, you've got, and these guys just sit there and they say, "What have you got to say for it?" And the guys said, "Well, we're doing this and we're doing that."
Hey, you're not having a go at me.
Yeah. And so then they say, "Well, step down." And they call up his exec officer, and the exec officer gets up in the thing, and he says, "What's been doing? What are you doing about these things?" And he said, "Well, the boss is doing this, and the boss is doing that."
So this is New Jersey, Brooklyn, Queens.
Yeah, no, this is Queens, Manhattan, Bronx.
Yep. That's the 5 boroughs.
Yeah.
Yep. So you had a commander in each one of those.
Yeah. And
New Jersey's pretty big. That must be a hard place to look after, though.
yeah, but I can't remember which borough this was in particular. I got a funny feeling it was Queens. And
Queens is a big area. Like you have a look
yeah.
at Queens out to JFK. That's massive.
And so this exec officer, he said, "Well, I'm not sure what the commander's doing for this perspective." And the bloody commissioner or assistant commissioner got up and said, "Stop right there. Stop right there. You are the executive officer for this commissioner, and you should know exactly everything that he is doing. Step down, sir." Just like that.
Fucking hell.
And so next morning, the headlines. Was borough commander replaced by first female borough commander. So it was. I didn't realise at the time how dynamic it was, but it was that significant. The guy was stood down, and his exec officer was stood down as well. So
Wow.
yeah. So that from there, we talk about international. I went to Canada, and
On the East Coast or West Coast?
no, Ottawa to start with. So I caught up with a guy that I'd met at a conference in Sydney some years before, and he was head of the Canadian oceans and fisheries, and then I went on to Vancouver. We arrived in Ottawa. It was deep in snow, so that you got the snow scrapers out for the airport, and then walking around the main street, snow's up around your bloody your chest, and you think, "Oh shit." So I went to Canada and caught up with another guy I'd met at a conference, and he was really good in that he wanted to expose me to all the the sort of scenarios that they deal with on a regular basis. So he actually took me to a union meeting of Canadian fisheries officers, and it was interesting that one of the things that they were debating significantly was an issue that we confronted here regularly. That was the marking or non-marking of patrol vehicles. So why would you do that? Why would that be a problem? The problem is, of course, is that officers continually feel that the patrol vehicle is something that they can use in their private life as well. And of course, it's a government-owned vehicle, and it should be
Logged.
restricted to those activities are assigned to the job. And so that was the number one issue at this particular day. And there was 40 people at this table, and I sort of had to make a comment in the end that this is a problem that we've faced significantly in Australia. But number one is that if you've got a patrol vehicle, it should be marked in terms of deterrence so that people at least know that you've been in the area and can visualise that you're there for a purpose. Whereas if it's unmarked, no one knows you've even been there. So that was
Yeah,
the
yeah. I just going back one step. I think you yourself should be credited for not going ahead with the arms thing in regards to the fisheries department. Now that's you could get glorified with it and say, oh yeah, we need to have some sort of, and I would be in favour probably that there's some sort of security for you guys. You're not meant to die at work either, but to with the events that happen further down the track in Tasmania and all that, if you look at the runaway stats in America with guns,
yeah.
it's a title on its own, isn't it?
It comes back to what I said. No fish is worth a human life. And that's what you've got to have in the back of your mind. And that's what I always would say to people. I would provide my guys with every form of training that they needed to avoid that. We did a lot of the verbal confrontation stuff, how to back out of a scenario, how to lift yourself up. So come at a level well down the ladder and be able to escalate that in terms of being able to avoid any form of confrontation.
Yeah, and to put fear into the opposition.
Yeah. Or if there was a known need to involve police, because once you involve police, you're at another level already. And if the problem, not the problem, but the thing with involving police, as long as you communicated to them what the issue was, and they understood clearly what this was about, you had no problem whatsoever. And that in all my career, and I've been a regulator for the whole career, I've never been assaulted, nor have I needed to arrest someone. And I'm quite proud of that record. But there are a number of people that have worked for me over time that I can say that, they've used force under their delegations that they probably didn't need to do. And it's unfortunate because what it does...
Tarnish.
It tarnishes the reputation of the organisation, but it also enrages those people that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So can you imagine, you've got to you're walking out on a jetty to talk to people on a jetty about their fishing activities. Are you going to deal with them the same way you deal with a poacher who's, likely to threaten your life? Of course you're not. So you've got to be able to elevate or escalate, your approaches in those sort of things. And a number of times, I remember days when size limits, for example, didn't apply on jetties in South Australia. Why? I don't know. I think it was because people felt that, that's where kids went fishing, and why would you apply size limits? But the problem was it was a very, very sane defence if you were caught with a number of undersized fish. And you've probably seen it yourself. So there's a couple of activities we did there. One, I implemented the jetty measuring station. So if you go to any jetty in South Australia, you'll find a jetty measuring station. We implemented that in 1999 at a cost of $100,000 because, one, we recognise that is the first place most kids learn to fish. So the first thing they should learn is if they catch a fish, what is that fish? And what's the size limit and why is there a size limit? So that has turned that whole process around. And those jetty measuring stations are still there today. So they've been there for, 25 years now. We did a lot of work on, one, the type of material that could be used that wasn't going to corrode in the saltwater environment. And secondly, they could be upgraded and updated when there were changes to legislation about bag and size limits. So they've worked. But number two was that it took away any defence. So I don't know how many times I can sit here and say to you that I've walked down a jetty back in the day, walking the beat if you like, talking to people on the jetty about the fish they've taken. And you look in the bucket and you see an undersized fish where there is size limits that apply, and they'll say, oh no, the kid took that. And the kid will turn around and say, no, Dad, no, you got that one. And, so that defence disappears straight away. And I've got to say that I have a particular issue about parents that use their kids for their defence. And it's just so wrong. And I remember a particular episode at Port Hughes one day, and it was quite a busy day. And I was there covertly, so I was in an unmarked vehicle. I wasn't in uniform with another officer. And cars were streaming into the boat ramp. But as we were watching what was going on, we saw a boat come in from out towards Tipperary Light and come in. And he sort of nosed in towards the ramp, and then he sort of turned around and he went back out. Went out a bit of a way and stood there, which wasn't unusual because sometimes people did that to clean up their boat or clean up the fish and stuff like that. But he then ventured in closer to shore, and I was watching him closely at this stage. And he put two kids over the side with a bag, and they were in, chin deep friggin' water.
Dum, 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 dum,
Yeah.
dum, dum, dum.
And these kids marched ashore carrying this bag. And if you know Port Hughes, they then walked across the beach and they had to go up a cliff face towards the shack area. So I took off immediately and drove around to where the kids were coming up and trying not to be too brutal about the whole thing. I said, "How you going, boys? Got some fish?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, Dad's caught a lot of fish today, da, 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 da." And so I said, "Do you mind if I have a look?" And they said, "Oh, no," well, I got no choice. And so I had a look, and it was a bag full of whiting, a significant bag full. And so I said, "Oh, look, I'll take them down to your dad at the boat ramp." That's how I dismissed it. Went back to the boat ramp, waited for this turkey to come in. And he was just an arrogant piece of shit, to be honest. So I said to him, I jumped onto his boat, as in the boat ramp, and said, "How'd you go?" He said, "Oh, yeah, look. Might have got one or two over the bag in there, mate. I didn't really count them that well, and they'd been over to the cow side." And so I counted them out, and sure enough, he was two over the bag, whatever the bag was at the time. And I said, that's it for the day?" And he said, yeah, that's it. Then I pulled the other bag out. I said, "What about these?" And dropped them on him. "Oh, yeah, what about those?" And he said, "Oh, the kids caught them." I said, "No, they didn't. No, they've already said to me that you caught them." So he had double the bag of whiting. And he was a local car dealer. And, he said to me, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter, whatever. If you're going to fine me, that's fine. I'll just take it back next time I service your cars," because he serviced our local patrol cars. And I said, "I don't want to even hear that." So it ended up,
God.
yeah, he... I booked him that day, and I remember the local copper saying to me, "Best thing you've done," because they had no time for him. He's a bit of a smart ass. We went to court, and there's another bloke in the boat with him who was a local farmer, and he took the hit. And I said, "This is not right." So the fine was fuck all, and so we appealed the matter, and we actually ended up getting up. But it's one of those terrible things where parents use kids to cover their own, misdemeanor. I know it's a summary offence, it's not criminal or anything like that, but really, is that the attitude you want to train your kids up into? So I was quite angry that day, to be honest. So, Port Hughes.
Yeah, Port Hughes. It's got a little bit of history about it.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work over at Wallaroo. I stay over at Marina quite a bit.
Yep.
We old wind town. It does blow a fair bit there, and
Wallaroo's. I used to spend a lot of time there waiting for the prawn trawlers to come in. That's where a lot of them come in and unload. And,
aren't they funny when they come in and they're all all the fish boys are pumped and the music's blaring. We did a lot of buildings there, just on the end of the marina there.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side, you'd know where I'm talking about. And, we'd watch them come in and their shirts are off and their testosterone's about 9 million parts.
It's an interesting bloody role, really, because, they only fish about 50, between 50 and 60 nights a year. No, 50 or 60 nights a year is all they fish. So those guys have only got a job for 50 or 60 days.
How far do they fish out?
Throughout the Gulf. So
they go for a week or 5 days?
No, there's a lot of things that determine how and when they go fishing. So number one is they do what is called survey shots. So before the opening, which is aligned with the moon movement, they go out and do some trawling in every part of the Gulf where they normally fish. They then, all their catch is assessed by themselves in terms of size and spawning. and they will then determine where they will fish at the next opening. So then they'll go back to port, and the fleet will come out. In the case of Spencer Gulf, I think there's still 39 licensed vessels in that Gulf. There's 11 in this Gulf, and Gulf St Vincent. And they'll fish the moon phase. So they only fish 6 or 7 times a year and on the moon phase. And, you know, despite what everyone thinks about, you know, ripping up seagrasses and catching all this bycatch and shit, it doesn't happen. You know, the prawnies can only catch prawns on the sand bottom. And, you know, so on the end of their nets, they've got what's called tickler chains that kick up the sand and kick up the prawns into the trawl net.
Yep.
So rarely is it the same habitat where you'll find a lot of species of bycatch, like whiting. Like people talk about how much they slaughtered the whiting or how much they rip up the seagrasses. Well, there's no you know, reason for them to fish on seagrass because there's no prawns in seagrass. So the only other bycatch they do get is blue crab. But normally, under normal situations, they've got to return all those to the sea after at the same time they've caught them. So there's plenty of people that are there to to criticise, but the fact is a lot of it's not truthful. But then again, you know, there's always people that do the wrong thing. So coming back to I was going to talk about a helicopter, but you know, there was one occasion where I remember I went to the wharf at Whyalla. So
Whyalla.
Sitting at the Whyalla industrial wharf there, you know, where the big ships come in, that's where the prawnies would come in. This particular morning, I'd got up at Sparrow Fart and got down there. I was on my own, which I shouldn't have been. And the fleet were coming in, and a couple of skippers had given me a heads up. You know, look at this boat when it gets in, da-da-da. And I thought, oh, okay, there's the go. So I waited for this particular boat to get in, which I'd had problems with previously. And I jumped on board, went to the skipper who I knew from previous times.
Are they fairly aggressive towards you? Or no, they're pretty cool.
There's a bit about approach here, and this is one of the things I talk about a lot when I talk to people about your approach, your demeanour. You got to remember these guys have been working all fucking night, all night,
and you've jumped on them.
This is you think how you feel at the end of a hard day's work,
yes, sir.
And whether you're going to accept someone with authority to come in and start saying you're going to do this, you're going to do that. So I went to the wheelhouse, saw the skip, g'day mate, how you going, da-da-da. Any bycatch on board, bycatch being fish that you catch with the trawl net
accidentally,
but you're not allowed to keep. And he said, no, mate, no, you've spoken to me before, all that sort of stuff, da-da. And okay, I'm gonna have a look around. He said, oh yeah, go for it. And so he actually came downstairs with me down to the engine room, and everything was fine. You know, I didn't see anything. Then I went up forward, and I thought, there's all these tarpaulins, you know, laying out up in the foredeck, and I said to him, Ash, what's all that shit? And he said, I don't know. So I lifted it back, and there were fucking hundreds of blue crabs, hundreds of them. And
why take the risk?
Well, he didn't. He didn't know. I to this day don't believe he knew. The crew had done it for cashies. So by the time that had all evolved and all the boats had come in, I got off the boat, and there's all these local Whyalla people lined up
waiting
with
for
their
blue crab.
buckets. So I walked over and said, you guys waiting for prawns? Oh, no, we've come for our blue crabs.
No.
So I said, well, that's not going to happen today. I'm sorry. And I reckon off that boat, I took something like 8, 9 bins, you know, the fish bins, full of crabs.
Wow.
And
the big blueies.
Yeah, big blueies. So as you can imagine, they were prosecuted. But getting back to the helicopter and the prawn fleet, one of my worst experiences, if you like, with a helicopter, and I've had a number, was that this particular night we had twofold purpose in that we'd left Adelaide. It was 3 a.m. and pitch black, and we wanted to, number one, establish where the prawn fleet were fishing and how close to the line. So when, as I referred to earlier about the surveys, there'd also be lines on the water, if you like, as to where the prawnies could actually fish and where they couldn't fish. And sometimes they would meander over into the area where they couldn't fish. two reasons. One, they've just made a navigation error, or two, and I'm being kind there, or two, they had deliberately gone there because the thought was that there were more prawns there. So the the excitement would prevail and they'd meander over this area. And remembering that their trawl would be down for sometimes an hour and a half, and during that time, if they've finished sorting the previous catch, they're now into a bit of downtime before they bring up the next shot. Those guys normally do 4 or 5 shots a night. So, but in this particular occasion, we'd gone over it. That was number one priority for our patrol, and the second priority was an early morning netting patrol between Cowell and Whyalla. So places like Cowlard's Landing, which was an aquatic reserve, and other places between those two locations. So we got over the middle of Spencer Gulf. There was a bit of moon, so it wasn't pitch black, but we were travelling across the Gulf, and the prawn fleet were directly below us. I could see, obviously see the lights of the prawn fleet, and I'd said to the pilot, if one of these vessels were over the line right now, where are we going to be our points of determining exactly where they are? So we'd have to do time and distance runs between, say, Cowell and Whyalla, which we could see to our north. While we're talking about this, there was this small wisp of friggin' cloud that we'd flown into. And I can tell you now, it wasn't a big bit of cloud. It was just a wisp of cloud. And that was nothing. I mean, that was a normal part of night operations. But in this particular case, the pilot had all of a sudden become disorientated. I didn't know that. And the guy
Probably a good thing.
And the guy in the back didn't know that either. But all of a sudden, we're into what's called auto-rotate. So auto-rotate is when the pilot just puts the plane into a position where you're gliding, if you like, downwards in a spiral fashion.
To get below the cloud line?
Yeah.
To reorientate?
That's right. And in this case, quite quickly.
How low did you go?
Well, that was the point. So I got quite concerned at this point because I'm saying, well, how long is this going to go on? And so I'd turn around and see in the back, and there's my mate. He's in the crash position in the back seat.
Oh, no.
And I thought, oh, my God. So I looked out the window on my side, and I could see the water. We were rapidly coming to the water. So I sort of elbowed the pilot. I said, John, what are we fucking doing? And he just grabbed the stick, and we pulled it. I'll tell you, we were so close to smacking the water.
Was he still disorientated at that level?
Yeah,
you were going into the drink.
He was mesmerised.
If you didn't hit him, you would have gone down.
Oh, yeah. We were in the water. And
fuck.
So we got back up to height. We carried on to Cowell and landed on the oval in Cowell, and it was still dark. And
what size plane was that? A Cessna or something?
No, this is a helicopter.
Oh, in the chopper.
This is a Ranger.
Sorry.
A jet Ranger.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, single engine. And
you're in big trouble.
Oh, yeah. So we got there, and we had a patrol from Lincoln that met us, that was meeting us there anyway to do our backup along the coastline up for the next part of the patrol. And I just jumped out of the truck. I didn't say anything. I just jumped out, and I got in the car, and I said to the guy, I said, Rick, get me the fuck out of here. I've had enough. And one of the Lincoln guys jumped in the chopper, and they continued the patrol and went on. So at the end of the day, we finished the patrol, and we had to get back in the chopper and head back to Adelaide. And
far out.
And so halfway back across the Gulf, the pilot kicked in and said, my apologies, this morning. I just want to let you know that I suffered what I think was vertigo. I've never had that situation occur before. I'm reporting it to the Civil Aviation Authority as an incident in air.
Wow. You were lucky, not lucky. That was very forthright of yourself to say.
Look, if I hadn't looked out the window and saw how fast the water was approaching, I probably wouldn't have even done that. But you just don't do that.
Did he look a bit disillusioned, or
he was focused to the front? Just focused ahead.
Even though you were.
Yeah. So that was one of my
that is a close
close
call.
to death. Yeah. episodes in a chopper. There were a couple of others, but there was another one. I remember at Stenhouse Bay, Marion Bay. We were
You don't want to go in the water down there.
no, we were actually taking off.
Not telling
No,
you,
no, no,
not
no.
telling you the water, but
We'd actually taken off, heading back to Adelaide, and taking off. Bernie, that typically you take off like a plane. You know, you sort of stagger your approach. Yeah, and all of a sudden, the guy in the back, David, was hitting me in the shoulder, saying, "Look, look, look!" And I'm going,
birds.
"But look, no, it was a power line. So there's a power line that goes to Stenhouse Bay
Serious?
kiosk, and it's never ending. It comes from the top of the hill,
no.
and there's no marking. It was in those days there was no markings on it, and the closer we got, the bigger it got.
How'd you get away with that?
The pilot Bernie put it into a vertical.
He went straight up.
Straight upwards.
Oh, fuck that.
And then he put down straight away on the middle of the road there at Marion Bay. And
Did they get reported?
Yeah. He thought he'd hit it. He thought he'd hit the power line.
Far out.
But we stopped the chopper, did a full inspection, and then carried on, and it was okay. There was another one, though, where on this particular night we'd been on patrol all day on York Peninsula, and we'd got back to Adelaide Airport. It was about 5, I reckon, and we had a radio call on the HF, which is my boss, who was out at sea on a naval boat, off the shelf we mentioned earlier, off Sejuna. It's back in the days when we had, if people recall, the shootings at sea between tuna boats. When they got onto a patch of tuna, there was always a big rush to get to it first. On this particular occasion, there had been shots fired between vessels. And it's interesting that people I know today who sit on a board with me are the two skippers who were involved at that time. So, so I've now heard what really happened at the time. Anyway, we used the Navy, which we weren't supposed to because they're not supposed to be used for domestic purposes, but they had offered the assistance. And he got on the HF radio and said he wants us in Sejuna by next morning. Now, we're talking about 5 o'clock. We've done 5 hours of air, and he wants us to head to Sejuna, which is a significant travel time at night. So we reluctantly agreed. He got clearance. We went to Lincoln, refueled at Lincoln, and then we were doing the direct Lincoln to Sejuna Airport at night. Now, we're talking about midnight, 1 a.m. And we got a beam Venus Bay. So we were probably 10 mile off Venus Bay.
Good fishing spot there.
Yeah. And this light came on. And if you're in a chopper at night and it's pitch black and a light comes on, it's like a fucking searchlight. And it said battery. It just said battery.
Oh, no.
And so the pilot, Trevor, said to me, that doesn't look good. I said, well, how bad does it look? He said, well, here's the manual. Can you look it up? So here I am trying to, by torchlight, look at the manual.
By the way, what are they running? How many batteries?
I don't know how many batteries. They're in the nose of the chopper. So if the battery blows, you actually lose all your steering.
Oh, no.
Nothing significant. But so while I'm trying to look this thing up in the dark, next light comes on and says, battery hot. And, so I look it up, battery hot, land immediately. So
how far off the coast?
We're 8 to 10 miles out at sea.
So you did a big left bank.
So he says to me, where do you reckon we can land? I don't know. So we could just see the lights of Venus Bay in the distance. So I said, if we go to Venus Bay, if the tide's out, we can probably land on the beach there. But other than that, we're in trouble. So we diverted, went straight in towards Venus at full speed. And then another light comes on, and it now says something even more serious.
Landing gear.
And so then we sort of come in, and the lights we could see were the Venus Bay jetty. So we came in alongside the Venus Bay jetty, and the tide's in. So there's no beach available. And he said, Trevor just said to me, we've got to land this fucking right now. And so we lifted the chopper up a bit, and looked over, and there's a clearing. So he said, I'm putting down there. So we put down there. Now, we were talking about 1 and 2 a.m. in the morning. We put down. Then we got out of the chopper and run away, run away from this thing. And we're right smack bang in the middle of Venus Bay Caravan Park.
Oh, no.
And the tail rotor is about 2 metres away from someone's door entrance.
Oh, no.
And we'd already put a Mayday out. And back in those days, Venus Bay was on the old, turn the handle sort of phone thing. So all things happened. The whole community turned out. Everyone in the caravan park turned out. Someone thrust a six-pack in my hand. I'd never drunk a six-pack so fast in my life. And the whole town turned out. And then they had to try and cancel our Mayday. So that was done by the post office, the people in the post office. So it was quite an event. And in the meantime, I'd actually called up our people in Sejuna, so they drove down and got there about 3 a.m. in the morning to help us. They gave us a cabin there to sleep it off. And next morning, he got in touch with the company and they said, oh, no, we'll need to fly out a new battery, but the nearest place we can do that to is Streaky Bay Airport. God. So they flew this battery to Streaky Bay, and Trevor said to me, well, we've got to get this fucker from here to Streaky Bay to put the new battery in. He said, are you coming? And I had choices. And I said, no, I'll come with you. I'll be a coward if I didn't. So I jumped in and we got to Streaky Bay Airport. They switched the battery over and we were okay after that. But I'll tell you what, we did our work up at Sejuna. We got back to Lincoln a couple of days later and I've never had such a piss off in all my life. Trevor and I got absolutely smashed. Friday night at the Tasman Hotel in Port Lincoln. Oh, yeah. And that's when some of Trevor's little characteristics I had no idea about came to fore. So Trevor was a contract pilot for Lloyd Aviation at the time, but he'd owned his own company in Victoria called Aero Country. But we shared rooms in those days. So here we are in a room in the Tasman Hotel, single beds each. I wake up in the middle of the night to go for a pee, and all I can hear was like this water dribbling away. And I thought, what the hell's that? And there's Trevor sitting at the end of his bed pissing on the floor. And I've got to step by that to go into whatever.
I did that in British Columbia. Go on, keep going.
So I thought, well, this is all very strange. I haven't seen this before. So then I sort of got back to bed, and I reckon it was about 2 hours later, and I could hear this noise again. I thought, what's going on?
Oh, he's going again.
He's in the wardrobe.
Oh,
he's
that's
pissing
me.
in the wardrobe.
Mandy, you'll love this one.
And I said, Trevor, what are you doing? He's going, huh? I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to bed. So he got back into bed. So next morning I challenged him. I said, what was going on? He said, oh, look, I'm sorry. I've had this habit all my life. I said, what do you mean all your life? He said, when we were in Victoria, I had this magnificent home over there, and they had this smell in the house. They couldn't work out.
It was
He'd get up in the middle of the night.
It was him, and he was pissing in the closet.
He'd piss in the air conditioning vents.
Oh,
and
no.
and they didn't know it until they put the heating on. So they had to sell the house.
Fuck.
So, yeah, that poor, I had a lot of respect for Trevor. He unfortunately died of cancer many years ago now, but he was a lovely guy. So, yeah, I've never forgotten that episode. There was another one I probably backed out of was we were coming back from Kingscote, Kangaroo Island one day in the chopper, and the weather was terrible, like really blowing hard and rain.
Kills a few celebrities a year, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Flying.
So we jumped off. There's 5 of us on board, including pilot, and we got halfway across Investigator Strait, and all of a sudden these lights come on the dash again, and
I hope it didn't say battery.
no, this one wasn't battery. This was something else. Engine failure that came up. We thought, oh my God, what are we going to do here? And so we turned around, went back to Kingscote Airport, and landed. No, we went to Penneshaw. We landed in a field at Penneshaw, and so Trevor said, it wasn't Trevor, it was John, I think. But anyway, he said to me, oh, look, this should be okay once it cools down. And we restart. And I said, really? What, we're not going to do any He said, no, the engineers have said we should be okay on a restart. So I said, well, I don't think so. So myself and 2 others opted to jump on the ferry. So we got the ferry back, got someone to come down and pick us up at Cape Jervis. Only one of the other guys went
and
back.
The chopper went down, did it?
No, it went back okay. It was okay.
You get those gut feelings, though, don't you, where you go,
Oh yeah,
Nah, there's been some celebrities. I've been writing them down while I'm talking to you. You got John Denver, you got Shirley Strawn,
yeah,
you got Big Bubba, you got all the people
yeah, yeah,
that were told not to fly
yeah.
in shit weather. So, at the end of the day, I think when it does cut in and it is gut, and I think you've got to run with that to the best you can for just so that you've got a chance of living, because once you're gone, mate, you're gone. You don't get a second chance at it. And there's plenty of professional people that they go above where they think they are, and they're untouchable. And unfortunately, you know, money and all the attributes that go with the amount of money. Yeah, I'll be right, mate. I'll be right. I can fly around. I can do whatever I want. But push comes to shove, even if you got the hours of flying or whatever behind you, there's always those risks that one day it's not going to end up good for you and you end up dying. So I've got a good mate that's involved in trucks, and I know you know him as well. And I reckon I said to him about 15 years ago, don't get your plane license, mate. There's a lot of people depend on you, and you don't need to be doing stuff you don't need to be doing, and that's one of them. Is flying. As much as flying it is internationally. It's a fairly safe flight with the jumbo or the A380, and I think there's a push at the moment, Brian, to try to get the 747 back in the air. I've been watching a fair bit on YouTube
Saw
at
that the other day.
the moment about trying to go back to two engines, and
Yeah,
these engines are like 4 stories high,
yeah.
which, you're dragging your balls as you're trying to take off. But
I think one of the good outcomes after the initial days of when we had some problems with the helicopters was that when we came to night flying, we went to twin engine. So you had that added degree of safety, if you like.
I think so.
But I always remember after that Vertigo episode in the Spencer Gulf.
That was your closest to death, I reckon.
Yeah.
Did you feel it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank fuck you fucking nudged him.
There was a female pilot called Christine Davey, a chopper pilot, but she'd made her bones back in the day flying Fokker Friendships. She was a lovely woman. She's an older woman, and I ran into her at the airport before our next patrol, and she said to me, "How do you feel about the other night?" And I said, "Well, I've got to tell you, I don't feel like night flying anymore." She said, "Well, there's only one cure for that, and that's to get back out there." She said, "Tomorrow night, I'm free." And so tomorrow night we did the Gulf St Vincent prawn line down to Edithburgh, and she took me through cloud deliberately, and it was the best thing ever. I was okay after that. So you learn a bit from those sort of things.
Yeah, look, that shows strength to get back in there straight away, because it can be it could change your life that you then get that facade up that you'll never do it again. Which is
look, I also think that the helicopter was one of the best weapons we had in terms of illegal fishing, and it's a pity to see it disappeared, because in the budget line it was $250,000, $300,000 a year for 50 or 60 hours flying, but the return we got for effort was significantly higher than we do with any other method of enforcement.
If you look at the Ukraine war now, they're using all those drones, right? Yeah. And I know that's the new word, drone. But if you look at the ballistic missiles knocking these drones out that cost $110,000 a chuck, the Yanks are coming up. You may already know that they've got the laser beams now that are running at 40 hertz or 50 hertz or 60 hertz, whatever it is. But it's strong enough to knock these things out that are worth $300.
Yeah,
That can absolutely destroy, like they're killing the tanks in the Ukraine, Russia.
But what a weapon a drone could be these days in any sort of enforcement. I mean, it's being used significantly in the drug area, but
I think you won't get the wars of World War II again. I think that type of warfare, even though you'll still have people on the ground, a lot of it will be done.
In the control
Now
box.
Taiwan's a bit different because Taiwan's in a constrained strait,
Yeah.
and like you look at the hardware on both sides of that at the moment. That's a terrible position, especially having kids overseas. You know, like
Yeah.
that one there. If it does go bad,
Yeah.
okay, at least she's in a Commonwealth country. She's in London, no problem. She's probably
Yeah.
safer there than she is here. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, she's 30 hours away from us. We can't help it.
No.
You know how many
Yeah.
American bases are there in
Yeah.
London. So
Yeah.
that's a genuine, as a dad, and we think differently to the mums. Mums make everything. Dads
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
do what dads do.
Yeah.
You know, if wartime did break out again, and like if you look through the ages, we haven't had a war, touch wood,
No.
since
Other
19...
than all the little ancillary stuff
That's
been
right.
going on over the years, and we sit back and we think ourselves so lucky that we're living in Adelaide, South Australia, and well away from
Still on
most
the target.
Oh yeah.
We're not 8 minutes away. We're 8 minutes 34 seconds
Yeah.
away.
I was just going to say, getting back to the international experience, that in the mid '90s, I also spent a lot of time in New Zealand, so working for New Zealand fisheries on a secondment. And Natalie came with me, and there's a little side story to that.
G'day, Nat.
Yeah, g'day Nat. She ended up getting a job with New Zealand Fisheries while I was there as well, in their intelligence area. So she ended up getting a higher security clearance than I bloody got.
Sorry, Brian, I can't talk to you at the moment.
That's a bit like that, really. I can't talk about that sort of stuff. But so she was in a significant area of importance.
You're going to have to sleep in the other room tonight.
Well, there's another story in itself. Is that we were there for 4 months, and they put us up, and we were in a penthouse.
North Island, South Island?
Wellington, North Island.
Okay.
So
yep.
we were living in a penthouse on top of the Castrol building on Queen's Wharf. So if you remember the days when they had the V8s there, the hairpin was directly below our balcony.
Beautiful.
So we had a significant event that night with all the people we were working with. But we had such a great time, and we saw all of New Zealand, while we're there. I go back there every year except for COVID to go marlin fishing with mates over there. So we had varied success in doing so, but we catch a lot of fish in doing it. I've got a mate over there who's got a pretty big vessel, and so we either fish out of New Plymouth, Taranaki, or Wahau Bay over in the northeast of the North Island. So I'm looking forward to going back there February next year. So he's now got a place at Whitiangi on the Coromandel Peninsula. So if anyone's seen where they had the shotgun start for the marlin comp, there's 400 boats left there at once this year. So we'll be part of that next year. So I'm looking forward to that. But I had a project to do over there, and that was to do with cultural fishing access. So theirs is significantly different than Australia, that Maori have 52% access to all natural resources, and they have it under permit arrangements through their particular tribe, if you like. But it also got us around in a lot of major operations that they were conducting fisheries-wise in different parts of the country. So we saw a lot, and we did a lot, and we really enjoyed it and maintained our friendships over the years from that. Then I did a couple of tours of South Africa.
There's no pool here. This house is built on stilts.
Yeah, but it's
That was out of Lethal Weapon.
yeah, but you're black. That's out of Lethal
Hey,
Weapon
Roger,
as well.
you know they're going to kill her, don't you?
Diplomatic immunity.
Just been revoked.
Yeah, let's stop. So the first time I went over was on a contract to talk about the approaches that we'd adopted here, particularly around changing the approach from enforcement to education, getting the community involved. And there was a woman over there called Maria Hauk, who was a criminologist at the university, who was doing a significant amount of work in one of their local communities, Hermandez, something like that. And I actually travelled up there with her on this particular occasion. So I had a community of black people who there were a significant number of poachers, so catching fish unlawfully. There were processors, and there were ordinary sustenance fishermen, and there were commercial fishermen. And it was trying to get the community to operate as one. And the government had actually committed to allocating fish quota to the community, in this case abalone, so that they could commonly enjoy the fruits of having a commercial thing. But turning some parts of the community around was extremely difficult. And so watching some of the public meetings and being involved in public meetings, it was, again, a very dynamic thing to see. And I've never, again, forgotten it, hearing people talk out loud about what their beliefs were and what they thought for the community, and the ones that actually thought for the community and not just for themselves. So the unfortunate thing was that as much as apartheid had gone, this is 2001, 2002, I did one presentation where it was all the people involved in enforcement for fisheries in South Africa. This is in Cape Town. And the ones that turned up were Defence, so South African Navy, South African Army, police, and a number of non-government type organisations that were involved, volunteers, green movements, that type of thing. But there was a dominance of South African enforcement people. And it was very clear that their views of their role in the community had not changed since apartheid. In fact, they were using the poaching scenario as an excuse to go into coastal communities with their water cannon tanks and at dawn and raid the place to find an illegal fisherman as such. And it wasn't changing the culture of the community at all. In fact, it was probably worsening the belief in looking after the natural resource. It was only the volunteer groups, if you like, or the green focus groups who were actually doing any significant change. So that was disappointing to see. I went back a second time as an invite again, and the first time I was working with a very close mate of mine from Rhode Island University and a guy from Norway who was a professor as well, in a multi-focused approach to changing, the whole thing. And the guy that was heading this up was the first black Minister of Fisheries they had. Just can't remember his name, but anyway, and he was quite forward focused and knew what needed to happen, and he's on track. The second time I went back, it was primarily with the audience being fisheries officers, and the first thing you notice that amongst the audience of 60 or 70, there was only 2 blacks, the rest were white. And a significant number of those were actually the Dutch Boer type South Africans who were quite arrogant and strong in their beliefs about where the country should be, regardless of what the government should be saying at the time. And I remember having a one-on-one confrontation with I spoke to one of the black fisheries officers and engaged in quite a conversation. In fact, to the point where we actually sponsored him and brought him out to Australia to open his mindset to what was happening here, because it was a significant change for them. But then this older guy sort of stepped in between us and said something to him in Afrikaans, which I didn't understand, to the point where the guy went to walk away. And I said, don't walk away, I haven't finished talking to you. He said, no, I have to go. So I turned around to this guy and I said, what's your problem? What's the problem here? Why can't I talk to him? You want to talk to us, you talk to me and nobody else. I tell you how it is, and that's how it will be. I thought, so this is what we're facing here. So the next day I changed my whole approach and I used the Australian Cricket Academy as the approach, that where we were at this point in time and where we are now in the world. And it was only because we established a cricket academy in Australia, which there was no public support for at the time because they couldn't see a need for it. And where we'd established ourselves, we were actually playing South Africa at the time we were there. So it was a sort of a good thing, but I still don't think I got through to the old guys who were the perpetrators of the old ways of doing things. But he did get permission to come to Australia and spend some time here with us and to learn the way things should be done. So something must have happened. So I think back and that was a positive from that.
I think, like even looking at tonight where we've had a bit of one-on-one, Brian, is that you speak very often about being the mediator in regards to response. And that's one thing I've taken out of tonight, very, very true to my heart, is that you can see possibly a situation that's going to happen and you diffuse it by coming in, obviously, with the right mechanics
Yeah.
to go in and diffuse it rather than let it escalate and boom,
Yeah.
then it gets into a problem.
Exactly.
And obviously, throughout all the stuff you've been involved in, you're using that format to diffuse rather than use guns, use
So
defence or use a structure of dressing it down. Don't let it escalate. Like, don't even let it get to 2. We'll take it to 1.5.
yeah. So my whole philosophy.
Did that come from your dad or did that come from you? Or
No, it came from probably my upbringing in terms of wanting justice and fairness. So I've always been a strong believer in I'm a regulator. So in all my working life, I have been a regulator. That's how I would openly describe myself. But when it comes to being a regulator and the practical application of regulation, my view is that your role is to ensure the intent of the law is achieved. So the intent of the law. And if you want to know what the intent of the law is, you go back to the first and second readings in Parliament of when the law was established to understand what the politicians of the day actually wanted to happen. Not what you interpret, not what other people interpret, or what's happened or evolved over time as to what that law meant. So if you do that and achieve it, you've got the goal you need in mind. Now sometimes that may not be necessarily how some people intended or people generally intended it to happen. If you can achieve the same outcome by being a bit more diverse, a bit more open about the approach, what's wrong? What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that because you've achieved the outcome of what was intended in the first place. But a lot of people, the hard and fast regulators or enforcers, if you like, struggle with that concept. So I use the example here of police, and
Yes.
I don't want to be detrimental because I have a lot of good friends who are police
Sure.
officers and
Me too.
and don't meet this standard. But police are trained black is black and white is white. There is no mid ground. And that's sometimes the problem is that if you're trained in that way, you can't see beyond that approach. And that is sometimes where you will get difficulty in terms of what the outcome might end up being. And I'm generalising. I'm not specifying. I'm generalising in saying that. And I've been an advocate of that for all my career.
My dad was a designs draftsman. He was a very calm man. He designed and drafted buildings around here just domestically, and they were the first ones to incorporate putting all the services in the slab.
Yeah.
It was a man called Ashley Hallandale that they were hooked up with, and they had a business
I've heard
going
of the Hallandales.
all those years ago. But look, at the end of the day, I'm from 3 boys. I've got an older brother, Matt, and a younger brother, Locke. And we are very calm people. We don't shout. We don't get nasty, you know. We all let ourselves down from time to time. But at the end of the day, we're fairly structured in regards to what you're saying in regards to doing this is the system. I'll abide by the system. I'm in the building industry, as you know.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work for builders down in the Victor Harbour area that I won't name. Now, I'll give you a situation this week. I've got 2 different species of frame, right? One's a bifold, one's a Lumiere. They have different size sills. But at the end of the day, whatever the clerk is or whoever's put the system in, the order into the system, I've got to try to get 3 frames over 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14 lineal meters in like a Z pattern. I've got to get all the head rights the same level.
Yep.
I've got an upper floor. I've got hebel floor.
Yeah.
I've got studs and hips that are all pushing up and doing all this stuff that they want to do. Now, it takes a lot of time to go down there and set them all up so that if you want an 18 mil or 19 mil finished floor level, so that they can put a timber floor or a tile floor or whatever it is, so that the transition to step outside, that you don't have to step over that big hump.
Yeah.
Now, it takes a lot of time to set it up, especially on big frames that are 2.4 by 6 metres.
Yep.
So you might spend maybe 2.5 hours trying to get all these things set up. Not finished, but just set up.
Yeah.
That's just to get that jam, that jam, that jam, that jam, that jam, all in the same plane, all working with the floor and all working with the head heights and the sill heights. And then I get a supervisor, and in all my years, and I'm going to bring it up tonight, for the 35 fucking years I've been doing what I've been doing, I got a supervisor telling me to fuck off and hangs up the phone, and I'm thinking, I've come all the way from Adelaide. You know, my boss is on holidays. I've got my big boss sick.
Yeah.
I'm a contractor anyway. I've been a contractor the whole way through. And I did sit there for a minute, and I thought, oh, fuck off. Okay, all right, deal with that. Whitey, you're a bloke, deal with that. That's just pussy talk, you know. And I thought, do I ring him back? And I thought, don't even go there, Whitey. You know, like he's in your wheelhouse now. And I thought, okay, let it go. And I did let it go. And then the next day, the carpenter rang me and said, hey, Ash, it's the carpenter from South Coast. So he's already denoted that he's crossed the line.
Yeah.
But once again, if you want that help, I'm reluctant to help now. You know, if you say, Brian Hemming, you fucking let me down because I had 2 fishes that were over fucking...
Yeah.
Come on, mate. Cut it. You knew what the fucking rules were before you start.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've said that in the past.
But, you know, like as I said, in 35 years of building, I've never been told to fuck off. And,
yeah.
You know, I just sit there and think, what a shame you let yourself down.
Yeah. It reminds me...
He was a plumber, though, so...
I remember I always had this thing, you know, when you're sitting down in interrogating people, or, you know, you're doing the formal interview process after you've caught them.
Yeah.
And I for some reason...
Are they pretty civil, some of them?
Most times.
Talk
most
pretty
times.
clear?
Because it's a summary offence.
It's a dead duck,
it's
isn't
not
it?
criminal unless you get to Abalone. But I used to always say that, come on, mate, you wouldn't lie to me, would you? I said, I fucking hate lies. I said it. I'd say our whole relationship would change if I found out you were lying to me. I used to use that line a fair bit. And, you know, generally they would say, no, I wouldn't never do that. And then you got evidence, you know, you sit there and go, but what about this?
He's lying.
You know, what is that telling me as to what you've just said?
Once again, if you work in that sphere of what's right and wrong, it doesn't take any longer to work inside that sphere.
Yeah. Was it
right?
There was this guy, a Dutch guy, was a guy.
He liked his cheese.
I can't remember if it was helicopter or not, but we'd found him netting. So on the York Peninsula, after netting was banned, you know, and there was this massive net out near
South Australia's so bad, isn't it?
Near Cockle Beach on the York Peninsula on the western seaboard, and this mesh net, sort of went out from this part of the beach, went right around, and came in that part of the beach. So it was massive. You know, it was probably 200-300 metre net, or even could have been a bit longer. But so there's 2 of us. We got there, and there was no one around. So we started pulling this thing in, and it hadn't been tended for some hours because a lot of fish that were perished in the net, and we then noticed a bloke sort of standing up in the dunes, and we looked up. I thought, well, who's he? So we went up, and he sort of came to us eventually, And so we got him down. He said, "Oh no, I don't know who that belongs to." Da 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 da. And so we said, "Oh, okay. Well, we'll come back and see you, when we're finished." So we sort of we started marching down to the other end of the net, so north of where he was. And Leon, the guy with me, who's deceased now, but he said to me, "Just keep an eye on him." So we sort of looked ahead, but keeping our peripheral vision open. Next minute, he goes into a full gallop up into the sand dunes. Well, it's on here. We're on. So, so up we galloped into the dunes, and there he is, throwing all this stuff into the scrub. And what it was, because he told us this net wasn't his, but what it was cut up pieces of railway sleeper. And what were the anchors on the net? Railway sleeper, the same shit. So he then came up with all this bloody thing about his wife's dying of cancer and needs to have fresh fish. You know what he's got in the camp with him? A female Aboriginal from Point Pearce Mission. She's there sleeping with him. So that all went out the window as well. So when we got back to Adelaide, we had to call him in to do a formal interview with him. Well, my goodness, he just lied after lie. And I remember him walking out of our office, and he went to the lift, and I walked out about 10 minutes later, and he's still standing by the lift, and he's leaning against with his head hanging down, like shaking his head, like, what have I done? Anyway, he ended up pleading guilty. So,
Brian, we're nearly at 2.5 hours. What I want to do is just quickly touch base on the boating side of.
yeah.
We're going to run out of time. I'm 3 hours. 3 hours is going to cost me a fair bit in regards to time in producing, but just in regards to the boating, in regards to doing the surveys for the boats. Now that was going to be a national.
Yeah. So
Just touch lightly on.
yeah,
Don't go too hard.
There were 3 national laws provided: one for heavy vehicles, one for maritime, and one for rail safety. The one you're referring to is maritime. So up until the national law came into effect in 2018, we had every jurisdiction in this country managing commercial vessel operations in terms of survey a vessel, qualifications to run a vessel. In fact, if you had a qualification to run a commercial vessel, for example, in South Australia, it wasn't recognised in Western Australia. So that was a significant impact on the offshore industry, where you've got a lot of South Australians who work in the FIFO industry, particularly on the rigs off the West Australian coast and off the north coast in Darwin. So the national law came into play, which meant we were now going to combine all the jurisdiction controls into the national control under the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. So my role in 2015 as National Operations Manager was to implement that national system. So we had a significant hurdle to jump, because that meant capturing all the fishing vessels, ferries, any other commercial operations, charter vessels under a national approach.
How long did that take to build up all that information before you even went forward into?
So I started in 2015. It had already been in operation since 2012, and we finally got it into play in 2018. So 6 years. But there were a lot of changes. Well, not changes, but conditions given to actually get it across the line at the time, because some areas, particularly Queensland, were so entrenched in their own local processes. But coincidentally, in Queensland is where we were losing the most lives in the commercial fishing industry, because of, I believe, a lack of uniformity across the country. People were dying in Western Australia in a trawl fishery hookup, the same as people were dying in Queensland, but no one was marrying the two together. So until I started actually giving evidence at coronials in Darwin and West Australia and Queensland, that we had this first link up between, there was a national problem.
So this is like deckhands getting cleaned up in the net.
Oh, it was the whole crew.
Being killed?
The whole crew. So a trawl vessel would be out there, they'd hook up on something on the bottom, and they would turn turtle and disappear into the water. And, we're talking about significant numbers of lives. The last one of significance was the Diane. The Diane was a vessel that went out of 1066, whatever I think it's called, and was a biche de mer dive boat. So there were 6 divers on board and a skipper. It went out at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night to start work on a week's trawl, a trawl dive for biche de mer, sea slug, and it disappeared that night. No communication. It was too late. The only reason we've got enough information about it is one of the crew members survived, and he survived because he saw the vessel was going to heel and not come back from the heeling over. He actually grabbed the stairway.
Has it gone over like that?
It's gone over and doesn't return. So he's actually grabbed the stairway. The only escape from where the crew were, watching videos, having a meal, that sort of stuff. He grabbed it, the staircase up into the wheelhouse, and was able to escape the wheelhouse. Unlike the skipper and the other guy that was in the wheelhouse, they were found still in the wheelhouse. He got outside the vessel. He actually sat on the hull of that vessel for hours listening to the guys dying.
So just a little bit of air left in the...
listening to those guys dying and not knowing that they could not get out of that vessel. He was luckily picked up by a passing yacht the following morning, and when he was at its extreme. The vessel had gone. He was in free swim, and a woman actually heard his cries when the yacht was passing. They picked him up. So that's how we got a first-hand account of what actually happened. But that was very similar to many other vessels that were going down in the Queensland and West Australian coast at the time. And a hookup can be, you've hooked the net, the trawl net onto a rock. It could be a car body that someone's dumped there for a fish wreck or whatever. But unless you do the right things, like turn the engine off or slacken off the motor, you're going to turn turtle. That's what it's called. And you talk to people with first-hand experience in that. You've got seconds, not minutes, seconds to make decisions to survive. And if you don't make the right decision, you're down with the boat in significant depth of water.
What about road transport? You've been involved in that one as well?
Yeah, the trucking industry. So we had a lot to do with that before. Again, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator has taken its role now as one of the other national reforms. In South Australia, look, generally, I found that most of the industry is compliant and safety conscious, but the usual thing, you get an element that just flaunt the laws, and that's why we end up bringing safety cam into South Australia. So those gantries that people see across the road around the state are the continuation of the New South Wales safety cam. So what that does, it actually photographs and measures how much time it's taken a truck driver to get from this point to the next camera point. And if they're inside their log hours.
Big fines. I don't know why you'd even flaunt them.
Significant fines. The other part of that, of course, is we're actually able to use, and people generally won't be happy about this, we're able to use those same cameras, though, for automatic number plate recognition. So for unregistered, uninsured vehicles, that's how they were captured as well, because we use the same cameras for that purpose. That's the other thing we turn them onto.
What about the long term, which is the last part to get the trucks out of coming down Mount Lofty? We've got the concrete expressway now.
I think there's only one solution. This is my view.
You've got to get rid of that, don't you? You've got to get rid of the...
So my view is...
Because they're still crashing in there. Sorry
that's
to cut
not
you
going
off.
to change. It's not going to change.
5 weeks ago, they hit the wall again and fucking cremated
Speed limits, speed cameras is not going to change. The arrested beds is part of the problem.
The arrested beds are good, though, because they're there for a reason.
But you've got to understand how much it costs to get the truck off the arrested bed. It's tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
So there's a reluctance in the mind of the driver to not use the arrested bed at times when he should be using it. That's an issue.
So that's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a detrimental part of the process.
It's a deterrent.
Yeah.
You say, I'm fucked, I'm gone. Now, the answer that...
Cash comes into my mind.
Well, why have you run out of brakes already? That's my question.
That's maintenance.
All right, now, if you're being dodgy on maintenance, then you should get your ass kicked and then you should go to jail.
Yeah.
Don't put your truckie at risk.
Yeah.
Now, if he's touched his brake 2 times and he's...
Yeah. So, as I said, my personal view, there's one solution. There is a subsidiary solution. Solution is to divert all that heavy vehicle traffic out through Palmer and bypass Adelaide totally. And it's not something that can't be achieved.
I thought the last part of getting everything to Tailem Bend, Murray Bridge, was going out around Gawler and then coming back.
Yeah, yeah. So go out through Palmer and head out towards Gawler.
So that's still going to happen?
No, I'm not saying it's going to happen. That's been proposed a number of times, but it's never got any traction.
So at this stage, we've got to there's nothing in the pipeline to get us to Tailem Bend.
The other thing that I sometimes
so that'll be another 2 decades, at least.
Yeah, or more deaths.
We're going to continue killing people coming down the freeway.
Yeah, it's
or don't let them come down the freeway.
The other thing that could change is that we once had a vehicle checking station at Tailem Bend that was closed for budget reasons back in my time in the 2000s. That you could resurrect a checking station at Tailem Bend and basically ensure that every heavy vehicle that went through there was roadworthy checked. It would be a significant burden to the industry, but is it what's the cost versus the outcome? That's what you've got to look at. I always remember back to the Salisbury rail disaster. Remember when the train hit the bus and 4 people were killed at Salisbury?
Yes.
There was a significant impact to industry in that the speed limit was changed back to 80 kilometres per hour for trains. The issue there is that it wasn't a train accident. It was a road accident. You know, the bus should never have been overhanging the rail line. The train had nowhere to go, and I feel for the families of the people that were killed. But we've got to put these things in perspective, and the financial loss to the rail industry was significant in that reduction in speed limit. And there won't be a lot of sympathy for that around the place, because people now see these trains that are 1.5 to 2 kilometres long, 1.8 kilometres long, travelling through urban areas.
Sure.
It just seems a thing of the past, but that's where we get our goods from. If you take away the rail, it's more trucks.
It's a major
it's either more trucks or
it's
more rail.
It's a north-south corridor. You've look when you get right into the Bombay Bicycle Club, where you've got the overpass bridge now that's beautiful, and you've got the trains running without traffic, without train beams and all that.
Yeah.
How much that's eased that north-south transfer.
Yeah. One of the good outcomes, if you like, from the Salisbury disaster was the treatment of level crossings that should have been happening before that. We've now got significant signage on level crossings. We've got speed limits. We've got speed cameras on level crossings.
Brian, I remember back when I was a young bloke and I was only, I'd only just got married. So let's say I was 23, 24, 25 to 27, 28, something. I was still doing shower screens. We were doing 6 or 8 a day. We were bang, 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 bang. And I remember being at the Nan crossing. And I don't even reckon that had boom gates on it back then.
Yeah. It's still there.
And the worst thing is a brown train had gone through there. And I remember being so tired. I was so tired, like I'd gone all day, and I was sitting there because the lights were going ding, 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 ding. And I thought, I can't even see the train. I'm just going to go through it. Mm. But the train was already going through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I could have been killed instantly like that. Because the railway line at that stage wasn't probably... I don't even reckon there was a boom gate back then. This is going back a long time ago, and I'm not having a go at the system. Yeah. I was having a go at me that I was so tired I'd worked 8 or 9 hours on top of driving.
I feel for the train drivers. I really do, and I've got a lot of friends who are train drivers over time.
Quite a few jobs for train drivers where they... Yeah, the people eyeball them and then jump in front of the train.
I've got a mate exactly like that at Bowden Station coming in.
These guys are like this.
He's got a full freight on, and he locked eyes on this guy and he just jumped straight in front of him. And he'll never. He said, as he said, I go to sleep every night. That's what I see, his eyes, and that's years ago now. And it just
it's pretty sad, isn't it?
It is. It's very, very sad. It's always victims. There's always victims.
What a what we might do, let's just finish off on some darts. I know you and I love darts together, and
Because we beat the youngsters.
we do beat them from time to time.
Yeah.
Luckily, they haven't beat us yet.
Smart asses they were.
They might have put a few smelly turds next to us last time to try to defer us.
They didn't have a focus on the outcome of the game. We had a strategic focus. We knew what we were trying to do. They were just trying to do it their way.
We did throw darts pretty well.
Yeah.
Just let me go for a slash. Let's finish off on the darts, and then we'll touch base on the single malt whiskies. And that time we're nearly at 3 hours, believe it or not.
Okay. Is it really? Want me to keep?
Keep going, mate. Keep going. Keep talking about
The darts.
the darts.
Yeah. Well,
About the boys' inability.
yeah, so this is Ash and I challenging our two sons, the Reeses. My son is a very good player at dart, and we play the same game, which is it's Shanghai or Mickey Mouse or whatever people like to call it. But it's a strategic game. If you don't play it strategically, you lose. But on this particular night, Ash and I had a few single malts, and the boys were on their beers, and they challenged us. And so Ash and I stood up, and away we went. And typically, the boys went for the big score, trying to get as much score in front of us as possible, whereas we just kept working our way down the numbers, 20, 19, 18, 17, and so on.
They let themselves down, didn't they?
Yeah, and all of a sudden, the boys realised, hey, there's something going on here. We're not in front. They were in front on the score, but they weren't in front anywhere else. So we just kept plugging away, and it got down to the point where we threw the winning dart. And they got all shitty and stormed off, and we sat there high-fiving for the next 10 minutes. So yeah, that's the boys and their darts. But I've got to say that since Reese hasn't been around, my throwing skills aren't as good as they were, because we used to play every single day when he was home. And when he wasn't working, we'd sometimes play 5 or 6 hours a day.
You do miss the kids around, don't you?
Oh,
yeah. We touched base on Mandy also before about that she works night shift, and we don't cross paths. We don't cross paths that often. That's all good. But at the end of the day, when the boys are around and you want a game of darts, you can all go down the back. And darts is the rule. You're out there just to play darts. You want to beat that other team, which
well, as you know, in my place,
you and I are unbeatable. So,
as you know, in my place, we've got a room designated just for darts. So it's the dart room.
That's right. No, it's a good area there, and we must be overdue to get back there.
Yeah, I've got this gift for you as well.
What have you got there?
Well, I've just got to work out what it is, because it was given to me some time ago by someone who'd been
to sign it.
To the States. It's a baseball of all things, and I'm not a baseball's follower. It says the 125th anniversary, a limited edition.
Is that right?
It doesn't say what an anniversary it is, but
Let's look at it.
it's a baseball. Oh, shit.
What have we got here? We've got limited edition. Okay, I don't know what it is either. Photo ball. Well, put it this way, it's a standard size ball.
Oh, it is a proper ball.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I was worried it was like a bit of a midget ball.
You'll have to
Sign it?
You'll have to sign it for me.
Okay.
I'll just have to try to get you a good pen that will work. Don't go too quick, Brian.
Too quick?
Don't go too quick signing it.
Why?
Just so the pen inks on it.
Oh.
So, yeah. No, it's... the boys were a bit cocky that night, weren't they, Brian? But
well, they stopped there. They lost their ability to talk after.
That was just prior to them going away, wasn't it? Beautiful. Love it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was Friday. That was our get-together before they left.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Like, you look now, I know it's not quite 2 years, but it's...
Yeah. Well, it's 12 months since Reese got back, our Reese.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
He surprised us. He got back. We had no idea he was even coming, and we were at a wake, a service, out at the Teacher Gully Golf Club. And next minute, there's all this flurry around the door. What's going on? And there's Reese at the door. As far as we knew, he was still in Belgium. So, yeah. So it was quite a surprise. And a lot of tears that night.
It is. It is so amazing to not only have the children, but it's when you get together. You know, that family uniform comes back into it, and everybody's at kosher. You know, there's no one overseas. The group's back together.
Yeah.
Everyone's standing a little bit taller, and
I've got a situation with my two eldest boys at the moment where they're not talking. And it's been going on now for a couple of years, and it's over.
How old are they now?
41 and 42.
All right, it's time we sort those guys out and say, hey,
but it's over.
Let it go.
Simple miscommunication and different approach to something, and you know, I've tried to treat them the same as I would normally treat both of them, but in terms of getting back together, it's sort of become a bit like my old work days. I used to refer to it as the crusade days. It's become a bit of a crusade again, because I just see it disappointing that you waste minutes or hours of your life.
I've seen some bad stuff where that family never ever got back together, and the father died, and the son never spoke again. You know, and you think, fucking pull your head in.
Yeah.
Life's too short to hold fucking bad stuff.
It's an interesting scenario to see that my youngest two, the twins, the 24-year-olds, get on with both of the others like nothing's going on. But there's that obvious tension between the two. I don't even talk to them as if the other one doesn't exist. I talk to them as I would normally. And, you know, as you've heard from my background, the way I've treated things, I've tried to be, you know, as trying to get a result or an outcome that's going to be favourable to all, but not, you know, sort of necessarily favour one from the other.
Well, you can't.
No.
You can't favour any of them.
But it's a bit like, you know, you over time, particularly when you have a number of employees. So at the height of my career, when I was in transport in 2002 and onwards, 600 odd people, that you get down to the idiosyncrasies of different people and different types. So, you know, I regard one of my eldest son as the emotional one and my second one as the mechanical one. So their approach to life is significantly different. But, you know, when the marriage broke up back in the day, the bond between them was inseparable. And yet they can't see back to those days now of how close they were for what I regard as a lack of communication over one particular issue, and that was when their mother passed away. So it's disappointing, but, you know, it's become my resolve, if you like, to get that, you know, get that outcome.
Be nice to get that outcome.
Yeah.
For their sake.
Oh, look, when we were all together, when we did get together, it was really, really good. But there's a number of factors involved. So
look, life can get pretty heavy, can't it? You know, we were talking about Scotty earlier on, and that's only on my side.
Yeah.
You know, up and onwards. You know, it's been a shitty week. Someone told me to get fucked. I bruised for a couple of minutes.
You know what they say to that? Build a bridge. Move on. You know what? Because they probably have.
Yeah. Move on and keep going. And, you know, this podcast that we do here, it's only a little show, but it's every Friday I get to talk to a new guest.
Yeah.
I generally know most of them, which gives me a little bit of a heads up. But, you know, just in tonight, just you and I talking, and I would love to have you on again because we really haven't even got past 50% of what we were going to talk about, and you may not want to, but
no, I'm more than happy to.
I would love to.
Look, you've probably heard from the passion that I display when I do talk about things, is that, you know, there are significant times in my life, in my career, that I'm more than happy to espouse, because I do so with the belief that there's something comes of it. I remember, you know, back in the day, we used to do a lot of media. So when we used to, you know, catch a significant poaching event, I'd make sure the media were involved. And there's one guy in particular for Channel 7, Peter Caldecott. Peter would always come up to me and say, Brian, what's the message you want to come from this what we're about to do. And
Don't
you'd sit there
poach.
and you'd sit there and say it might be something about size limits or boat limits or whatever. And he'd say, well, let's make sure we get that into the script of the show. And that's exactly how I, always wanted the things to happen is to make sure that, yeah, all right, it's all very well that we've gone out and got this and got that, but let's get the message across. And I want to tell you a quick one before we.
No, we got plenty of time.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
A quick one on that is that this at a particular time in the 90s again, we under the new legislation we jailed our first poacher, a guy called Nick Carianis in Ceduna. Little
Good Irish name.
Yeah, he was an atrocious looking guy, but he was a guy.
Is he still in there? Or?
Well, the upshot of that is a couple of years ago, he had a heart attack while he was diving for abalone, while he was poaching. He had a heart attack, and they pulled him up on the deck. He was dead. So yeah, he's gone now.
Good.
But on this particular occasion, so the media were all over it. So I was doing an interview, I think it was Peter Caldecott, in Victoria Square after we'd finished in the court. And this other guy from Channel 9 sort of put his mic in front of me as well and sort of took on the questions and so on. So afterwards, we're having a celebratory drink at the Sussex Hotel in Walkerville. And we're in the front bar, and with me were a couple of my guys, the Crown Prosecutor, the industry rep, Peter Gurry, a lovely guy. A number of us all there having a drink because it was a big case. So the 6 o'clock news comes on, it's up on the TV, and it talks about poacher jailed or something like that. Anyway, got them to turn the volume up, and it said, Ceduna man Brian Hemming was today jailed for 6 months.
It was you.
And we go, fucking what?
We got that wrong.
And so I immediately rang Channel 9. I said, what the fuck? What are you doing
How did
here?
they get that so wrong?
Because the journalist, a guy called Calhoun, because when he intervened in the interview that I was doing for Channel 7, he had no facts, and he didn't go back to the court and get the facts of the matter. So all he saw was my name. So I actually ended up suing Channel 9 and getting a significant amount of money out of them at that stage for defaming me, because that went national. So I had all these mates of mine from Ad Task Force in New South Wales. What the fuck's going on? You've been pinched. So, yeah, that was that one.
Wow, isn't that funny?
Mm.
Isn't it funny how things...
Yeah, it wasn't so funny at the time, I can tell you.
Nah.
Because when I rang them, they said it was too late to retract on that particular night. And if I remember rightly, it might have been a Friday, so I had to wait for the whole weekend before they could actually do the retraction. Yeah.
I, as you know, I've played baseball for a significant part of my life. There was a big gap in between. And I've got a good mate down at Woodville called Keith Mortimer, who has been with Woodville Baseball Club for a long, long time. He's been a great mentor to me. He's lost his wife recently, and I really wanted to try to get him up here at the Milne Road Studios and try to let him just tell his story, because he's one of those guys that you're not going to get again. He's put his heart on his sleeve to get through the whole system. He hasn't got a baseball series named after him or anything like that, but he's been a very big contributor down there at Drummond Avenue there, and I will continue to try to get him up here and have a chat, because he's an elderly statesman now, and it was only a year and a half ago I spoke to Wayne Buckerfield, and we were going to talk to the last Aussie digger here in Adelaide, and unfortunately over COVID-19 he did pass away, and we missed out on trying to get whatever stories was left with him that he would like to talk about, and to lose a digger, especially the last digger here in Adelaide, it was upsetting not to to get the chance to talk to him or listen to his stories, because those Anzac stories, and you know, they mean a lot to me. As you know, we put on a thing here every year, and we try to get services here from the Air Force as often as we can on that day to call in and have a beer and whatever they want to eat, and they come and go during the day, and you know, it's all about the Anzacs to me. I just love how they've given us the life we've got today. It's carefree. Look at us.
Yeah, my grandfather was an Anzac.
Means a lot. Means heaps to me. It's
it's a significance of me. I've never missed a dawn service. I've made sure our kids go to the dawn service with me over the time, and they look forward to going to it with me when we do. This year we were over on the west coast. We went to the dawn service at Sejuna.
beautiful.
Very touching, and as I said, he actually served at Gallipoli and survived. Went back to Cairo injured, and then went on to fight in France.
Wow.
Was gassed.
Wow.
Went to hospitalised in
Far.
England, and went back and fought again in France, and ended up in a hospital in the south of France, and then returned home. But going by my recollections of my dad's talking of his upbringing, it wasn't good. His father had changed significantly as effect of the war. One of my bucket list things is to take my 4 kids to follow his journey from Australia, Fremantle to Cairo, to Gallipoli and to France, and see those areas. So that will be something that happens in the next 3 to 4 years, hopefully.
Fremantle is a beautiful place.
Yeah, well, Fremantle and Albany, where they shift out from at the time.
Manny and I went there only 2.5 years ago. We spent 2 weeks over there, and that was gorgeous.
Yeah.
You know, like half of Australia lives over there.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's a beautiful place.
It's a great place.
Perth is a great place.
Great place to have a drink, just quietly, and a good seafood feed.
It is a good place.
Yeah. So I went. Natalie and I did a cruise of the Baltic back in 2009, just before COVID, and then made them, and I drove from Stockholm to Paris through Germany and Belgium and France. And we stopped at as many as we could war memorials along the way, and we could not get over how respectful the French in particular have been in maintaining those through the World War II War Commission, Graves Commission. But they're everywhere. There's over 1,000 of them, I think, in France alone.
There's so much war there.
Yeah, and the respect they show still to Australian soldiers is unbelievable. But I think probably the most overwhelming thing for me was, I can't remember the name of the place now, but where 10,000 Australian soldiers lost their lives in a single day. And, you know, when you travel around the country, I've been one of these people that looks around cemeteries, particularly remote ones in our outback and stuff. And to see, and we did it recently.
Port Vincent's got a lot.
Yeah, we went to Kuraby recently, which is halfway across the Nullarbor. And to see that the number of young Australians that
was
were
that
killed,
light horse or second?
I can't really say, but
Imperial.
You know,
Imperial.
I try to reconcile it in terms of how large that population would have been, and it's a significant percentage of the population of young people at the time died.
I've been banging on pretty hard since this Ukraine war, and I'm very much that you got the Russian president and the Ukraine president grab a pistol each, they walk out 15 yards and fire.
Yeah.
Whoever's still standing won the war, let it go.
Yeah.
Why kill all the young boys? The young boys don't hate the young boys from Russia.
Yeah.
Or Ukraine. Let the old guys shoot each other out and finish it. This is bullshit that we're killing so. I'll tell you where I want to go. Just we're nearly at 3 hours now. So what I would like to finish with, and you might say, I don't even want to go there. UAP, UFO, real or not real?
What?
UAP, UFO? Is it real?
UAP.
UFO?
Are UFOs real? Is that the question?
That's what I'm asking you now. You're in the government.
I'm a regulator. I'm a regulator. A regulator relies on fact.
You're retired now.
Regulator relies on fact. Fact is evidence. Evidence is what it requires.
I love it.
If there's no evidence to suggest there's a UFO, there's no UFO.
All right, so you're comfortable that there is zero.
Yeah, there's no evidence to support the theory that the fact that there is a UFO. So, and I've watched all the programs.
I love that. No,
Skinwalker and all that
take
sort
it on.
of shit.
Nah, Skinwalker's Indian anyway. I take it on, but it's always a good one to push left, right, and centre.
After you've had a few scotches.
Well, the stories grow better with the scotches. But I think we need to get the girls together again soon, and we need to, even without the kids there, try to get a dart session.
When's your Reese to be back home?
I don't know if he'll ever come home.
No, ours is home school holidays, 7th of July. He's back for a week.
Yeah, all right. Okay. They, Debbie and Reese were looking at trying to get back down into Adelaide. So what we might do is when Reese and Debbie are down, seeing Reese man's back around that date, we'll see what happens. I'm not quite sure. Reese has got some work with bits and pieces up there, and but we'll see what happens. But we can get.
So I'm happy to do this, some more of this. I mean, I've got plenty.
I would say we've only scratched the surface,
you have.
Brian. If you're happy in this format, the way that we're doing it, the only reason I'm trying to tiny it up at 3 hours, 3 hours costs me about 6 hours tomorrow. So, Brian Hemming, let's make this part 1, if you're comfortable with that.
More than happy.
And I would love you to be a regular on this one. It's local. We're only about 42 houses apart, and I certainly enjoy it. It's the stories that you hear, nobody else hears, and if it doesn't get into this format for other people to listen to, and it's there forever.
Yeah.
So
I used to always brag, if you like, that I've got a fisheries story for every coastal town in South Australia, and there's pretty well no exceptions. There's plenty of stories.
I'm honoured that you're here.
Oh, don't be.
And I can
Cheers,
clink a scotch with you, and I'd be more than happy to look at part 2 down the track there when it's convenient. And thanks for your time.
All right, thanks, Ash.
Thanks, Brian. It's been a lot of fun, man. We might as well finish the way we started. Thanks, buddy. It's been good having you here. It's a lot of fun on Friday, so...
Always been to talk about.
Thanks for the baseball as well. That'll be going straight into the pool room.
I don't know what the anniversary is, though.
I'll have to look it up. I don't need...
I don't know who gave it to me.
No. Looks good, though. It's real science. Thanks for signing up. Brian Hemming, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Ash.